Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the work session of Las Cruces City Council. Today is Monday, August 22nd, 2022. It's approximately 1 p.m. If you'd please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, as we always start off with our pets of the week, Jennifer Martinez from our communications office will be introducing them.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Jennifer Martinez with the city's communications office. And today I have the honor of introducing you to two very cute pets, and I will start with Nugget. Nugget is about 3 years old and very sweet. All she wants is love and affection. She likes to brush up against you to remind you that you belong to her. This little diva enjoys spending days getting loved on and also some peace and quiet time. She hopes you might have the perfect home for her. And then we have Wedo. This guy is also 3 years old. He's very energetic and playful, enjoys an active lifestyle in order to keep healthy. Wedo loves going on the leash and could be trained to be a great running or jogging partner. This guy is eager to please and knows how to sit for treats, and if you're looking for a loyal companion and a good workout buddy, this might be your guy. Make sure to jot down the animal numbers for these guys. If you forget, you can always go to the Animal Services Center of the Mesilla Valley Facebook page to get this information, and you can see the animal numbers right here underneath the pet. There's an adoption event going on this weekend from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. this Friday at Pioneer Park. There are two different locations, one on University Avenue and the other at the Roadrunner Parkway location. There's also an event on Saturday at the Borman Autoplex that runs from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's at their location on Bouts Road. And if you remember from the past couple of weeks, there is a month-long adoption event going on called Clear the Shelters. That's where the cost of adoptions is just $25. And if you have any questions about the Pets of the Week or adoption events, you can call the Animal Services Center at 382-0018. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yes, Nugget does look like a diva. Okay, next we're going to have our Jobs of the Week, and Chris Favor from Economic Development will be presenting.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. I was told I needed to put a little more pep in my step while I'm up here, so I'm going to attempt to do that. So hello, everybody. All right. Jazz hands? All right. And I won't say who up there told me, City Clerk, that I needed to put a little more pep in my step, so, okay. All right, so the City of Las Cruces has two jobs this week. The first one is the Community Health Coordinator, which pays between $35 and $50 an hour, and that's open until filled. Then Community Development Department has a building official, $31 to $45 per hour, and that closes on September 12th. Physicians Vascular Services has a medical receptionist, $14 an hour, and that closes on September 17th. Smith Roofing Company has general laborers and roofer helpers available, 3 positions, $13 to $20 an hour depending on experience, and that closes on September 11th. And Quest Diagnostics has a phlebotomist 2 for $13 to $17 an hour depending on experience, and that closes November 11th. And as always, New Mexico Workforce Connections can be reached at 575-524-6250, or you can find them at their offices 226 South Alameda here in Las Cruces, or on their website at employnewmexico.com. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, so we have 3 items on the agenda. First one being the item 3.1, the Police Auditor Semi-Annual Report presented by the OIR Group. And Viola Perea will kind of kick this off. So, Viola.
And what is it now, F7? F5? There we go. Okay, jazz hands, everybody. Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Councilors. I'm Viola Perea, City Auditor, and today we have 2 members of the OIR group with us, Mr. Steve Conley and Ms. Teresa Magula. Today they're going to present their second semi-annual audit of the Las Cruces Police Department.
I know Viola just introduced you, but if you don't mind, the first time, just state your name for the record. And
Of
yeah, when you
course.
speak. Okay, thank you.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and councilors. My name is Steve Conley, and I am with my colleague Teresa Magula from OIR Group. We are very happy to be visiting here from our home base in Southern California, and this is actually my first time visiting Las Cruces, so I'm particularly pleased to be here. Teresa was here for the first report back in January. We did arrive into town yesterday and had the opportunity to tour around a little bit. The police set us up with a couple of the community outreach officers who obviously know the whole city pretty well, and they kind of took us on a tour of the different neighborhoods and let us know about some of the projects that people are working on. And I will tell you, your names came up quite a bit during the hours that we were together, and it was all positive, I promise. So we definitely got a little bit of a fast-forwarded feel of the city, and we're very happy to be here. Teresa and I are two of the three-person member of the OIR Group team that is focused on Las Cruces. Our other colleague, Mike Giannacco, had a scheduling conflict. He met you all here in January, but he was not able to be here today. He certainly sends his regards, and we talked to him this morning and asked if he had any words of wisdom for us, and he said, don't mess it up. So with that, we have a real spring in our steps, and we're looking forward to presenting with you today. So in terms of advancing this, I should probably know how to do this, but thank goodness, Teresa, that arrow button. Okay. So just a little bit of background and review. Who we are, as I said, we operate out of Southern California, and we are police practices experts. We have some attorneys on our team and some folks who are experts in policy, and we have worked in this field for at least 17 years, and some of us have been around doing this kind of work for even longer. So we have clients primarily in California, but in some other states as well, and we've been very happy to be affiliated with the city of Las Cruces since March of 2021. And we actually started our work in the city as of May of 2021. So we had our first report here in January, and this is our second, I guess, semi-annual audit report based on the work that we have done since the last time we were here. So in terms of the specific things that we're going to be talking about and the progress, one of the goals of the work that we do, and we'll talk about it a little bit more specifically, is that the meat and potatoes of it is to actually look at specific complaint cases, misconduct investigations that the department does as part of its internal review and accountability process. But as we're going through those, part of the goal, along with just the scrutiny of it and the added transparency and accountability that having some outside eyes on it represents, part of what we're doing is trying to bring some of our familiarity with best practices and some of the expertise that we've developed in these systems over the years, and make recommendations to the department where we feel like an individual incident has kind of flashed something to our attention that we feel like could maybe represent a systemic change. And in terms of some of the recommendations that we had from last time that the department, I'm pleased to say that the department has been very responsive to our ideas really since we first started working with them. We have good communication with them on a regular basis. And as the slide says, one of the things that we encouraged was for them to make formal findings for every complaint case rather than just, sometimes if there weren't enough corroborating facts, they would just kind of inactivate the case without making a formal finding. And we pushed them to just go ahead and create that record for documentation purposes and on a going forward basis. And in terms of the classification of cases, they actually have a fairly intricate system for how they slot in their different kinds of complaints and what kind of investigations they're going to get accordingly. And we made some recommendations to refine that process, make it a little bit more straightforward, and in our view, to make it flow a little bit better and to make the matchup between the severity of the allegations and the amount of department attention detention align a little bit better, and that we have also noticed an improvement in that arena. And last but not least, one of the things that we hear about certainly nationally, and if you follow policing issues, the concept of de-escalation has been very much front and center in terms of expectations and public focus on policing and how policing gets done. There's been a huge emphasis on de-escalation and really trying to prioritize that. A lot of law enforcement agencies will tell you that the de-escalation term might be a relatively new one, but the concepts have been around for a really long time, and the familiar officers will tell you, we've been doing this ever since I started back in the 80s or 90s or whatever. But absolutely, in terms of the emphasis and in terms of some of the new techniques and approaches that are out there, we have suggested that they focus on that and provide updated de-escalation training for their personnel, and we're pleased to say that the department is well in the process of accomplishing that. Other elements that, again, are kind of leftover recommendations from the first report that we've kind of checked the progress on. The first of those on this slide has to do with commitment to training for welfare check and domestic violence calls. And what we mean by that in particular is a significant portion of the cases that we look at involve complaints that arise out of this inherently stressful, tense family kind of situation. Everybody's emotions can be elevated in that scenario, and the rules of what can be done and what should be done and what the role of the police should be in those situations. There's room for clarification and emphasis on how to navigate these sort of inherently difficult situations that the police are sometimes expected to respond to. So because it is such an important issue, and because we actually saw a lot of our actual specific complaints come out of that, we encourage the department to focus on that as part of the discretionary training that they're able to do with their folks, and just kind of give them some more tools and also remind them of what the protocols are for what they are allowed to do and not do in a given context. And in terms of supervisor professionalism and IA training, we are big advocates of the idea that the discipline process really should be something that the entire management level of the department has some knowledge of and investment in, rather than having it be this, isolated to internal affairs and kind of a secret that people aren't supposed to know about. We think all managers should be invested in accountability and should be aware of what the department is doing and be trained on some of the different elements of these investigations and officer rights and how it should work. And last but not least, we'll talk about a couple of policy changes that we recommended and that the department is in the process of implementing. So in terms of the scope of the audit of the report that we're presenting to you today, these were cases initiated, investigated, and closed by the department between December 1st and May 31st of 2022. There's a little bit of lag time between the end of our audit period and our presentation today, just because our completed reports have to go through some internal processes here in the city before they're ready for release to council. But that's the span of time that we're talking about. And our goal in looking through them is to ensure that the completed cases that we review are complete in terms of all of the investigations being framed and investigated and resolved appropriately one way or the other, that the investigations are objective and thorough, and that when whatever the upshot of the investigation is in terms of what it reveals, we're looking to see is department management taking appropriate action in response, whatever that might be, whether it's training or counseling, or in some cases a disciplinary actual consequence for the involved personnel, or a recognition that, hey, we need to change something operationally that we learned as a result of this process. And one of the things that our contract with the city asks us to do is to monitor certain aspects of the demographics of the materials that we look at. So that's featured in the report. Teresa will be talking about that a little bit later in our presentation. So the report, and you got the, obviously the summary report, which is, I guess, about 30 pages long, 35 pages long, and then The appendices are all the individual complaint cases that we have reviewed and assessed and contacted the department about, and all of those are, and the department has offered its feedback. All of those are included individually as appendices to your report, and we're happy to answer specific questions that you might have. So it's 16 cases. That doesn't represent all the cases that were opened during that time period, but some of the cases are still pending, and others of them just didn't reach our scope of work for one reason or another. There were, of the cases that we did review, 11 of them emerged from citizen complaints, and there were 5 internal investigations that were generated by department management in response to concerns that they had about officer performance or employee performance of one kind or another. And statistically, you'll hear Teresa talk about some of the outcomes. The numbers don't exactly line up. So 16 cases, but she's going to be talking about some bigger numbers than that in terms of individual outcomes. And just to be clear, the reason for that is because an individual case might involve allegations against multiple officers, and it will oftentimes involve multiple allegations of misconduct of different kinds. So if a complainant is frustrated or upset or feels like something was handled wrongly and mentions 2 or 3 different elements that represent, different potential policy violations by the department, the expectation is that the department is going to look at those and reach conclusions on them individually, and that's why some of the total numbers that Teresa will be talking about are a little bit bigger than that. Oh, and just to go back, another part of our mandate is to look at litigation. There's certainly a significant nexus between, ideally, there's a significant nexus between litigation and police internal review processes. These events that lead people to file claims or lawsuits are oftentimes things that the department should be looking at and saying, okay, what can we learn from this? Obviously, the legal process is going to work itself out on a separate track, but what about our operations is sort of revealed from this litigation, and are there any adjustments that are called for based on what we've learned in this process? So there are a couple cases that were closed during the audit period that are described in the report. In terms of the kind of big picture summary of our findings, we have consistently found that the department has done a very, very commendable job in terms of taking allegations seriously and conducting investigations that are appropriately complete, objective, and thorough. That said, we are in the business of scrutinizing these things pretty carefully, and we actually have a lot of experience. So we have found individual instances where some aspect of a case we thought could have been handled differently, more robustly. It's going to vary, obviously, from case to case, but we make recommendations in virtually every individual case report that we provide to the city. And the hope is that the department is going to look at those, digest those, and respond back to us if they think that we have it wrong. But overwhelmingly, they have said, hey, we understand what they're saying, that makes sense, and we will take steps to make that adjustment. So the investigations are good. We think the intentions are good. We think the department takes accountability appropriately seriously, but there's always room to tighten things up or to be a little bit more effective in one aspect or another, and Teresa will get into some of those details. And so, again, accountability, not all of the cases resulted in sustained findings that officers violated policy. There were several instances in which the officers were exonerated, and we concurred with that outcome based on the process that we go through, and I'll talk about that very briefly. So just again, to refresh people's memory, or for members of the public who aren't familiar, when a case is complete, we have access through the department to all of the underlying investigative materials. So we get the police reports from the original incident, we get all the body-worn camera recordings that were associated with that particular event, and then we get all of the internal affairs investigation materials as well. So interviews with witnesses, interviews with subject officers, memos that the investigators prepare as to the steps that they took and the findings that they made. All of those things are packaged up and given to us so that we can really have an in-depth understanding of what the issues were, what the department's response was. And we will digest that, and oftentimes we'll have a follow-up question or two for the department, and Lieutenant Gutierrez has been very helpful to us as our main point of contact in terms of answering questions or clarifying things for us. About whether it's New Mexico law or department policy or some things that might be missing from the case in terms of background that are raising questions in our minds. So we have a little bit of that interaction as well, which also helps us complete and make our analysis more effective. So that is the process that we go through. And then one of the last things that I want to just touch on briefly is we've talked about this with the department on a few occasions. A lot of the cases end up with the officers being exonerated, as I said, but when there are sustained policy violations, we have found in a general way, and there are exceptions to this, that the consequences tend to be a little lower than what we are familiar with in some other jurisdictions, and it varies from place to place. And, it's not wildly off or extremely concerning, but some of it just has to do with what the philosophy of discipline is, what the discipline process should be accomplishing. And there are places where we thought, hey, the severity of this and the significance maybe warranted a more significant consequence than what the officers ended up getting. So we've talked to the department about that. They are in the process of a pretty significant responsive undertaking, which is to put together a chart of consequences or sanctions, I think they call it, chart of sanctions, where they're going to try to formalize their bail schedule, some departments call it, or disciplinary matrix. They're going to try to formalize what the consequence is for given violations of policy, so there's a little more consistency, a little more predictability, and we look forward to kind of seeing how that plays out as that process unfolds. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, and of course, I'm here, and we're obviously here to be responsive to any questions that you have, so thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors. My name is Teresa Magula, and as Steve and Ms. Perea mentioned, I was here in January, had the pleasure of presenting to you. This time I'm really pleased that you all had the background material and we can kind of speak to some of the details that we found during the course of our work in these past 6 months. So part of our scope of work and our mandate is to report out on some of the demographics that we're finding. And one of the things that we look at are these, what had the incident occur? So mostly they are initiated by calls for service. Okay, so we have 10 total that are from calls for service. We wanted to highlight that 4 of the 10 were related to domestic violence calls. So as Steve mentioned earlier, we saw that there was kind of this trend of complaints being initiated as a result of those kind of high tension and emotional kinds of calls, right? So we wanted to highlight that we are continuing to look at that category in specific to see where the department is perhaps providing more training or guidance to officers. 4 of them were a result of a traffic stop, and then the rest were a traffic accident, a civil standby, and a transport that occurred of one of the subjects. We look at the complaint demographics, and so mostly we found that they were coming from the zip code 88001, 6 of them. You can see the rest of the breakdown there. I'm kind of trickling through the different parts of the city. The race of the complainants was a majority Hispanic, 7 were white, and 1 was a black complainant. And as Steve mentioned, we had a review of 16 cases, but that involved a total of 27 Las Cruces Police Department employees. And I say employees, not officers, because some involved the non-sworn employees of the department. 1 was a detective, 2 sergeants, 22 officers. 1 was a transport officer related to that case that I mentioned was a transport, and 1 was a non-sworn officer, member of the code enforcement unit. And we also try to look for some trends across officer demographics, right? So there's sometimes some concern of bias in the way that the police are policing in the community. And we saw that of the officers who were named, 15 were Hispanic and 12 were white. We did a little bit of demographic data comparison, and nothing came to the surface as far as any systemic bias that we could really review from the very limited case sample that we have. So certainly we will continue to look at that as time goes on to see if we identify any trends or any systemic patterns of practice that we might be concerned about. But at this point, we're not seeing anything that's really rising to the level of concern with relations to the race or any bias that's involved there. Okay, and so then every case, right, will have one or more allegations. So as Steve mentioned, a complainant might have an issue with a variety of different things related to the way that the police responded to their incident. So for those that might not be familiar, allegations are framed by the department based on the potential misconduct that is related. So the allegations are based in the types of misconduct based in a general order or a policy. So to the extent that an officer may or may not have violated department policy, the allegation is framed out of that. And we found that there were 22 of them that were exonerated and 19 that were sustained. The ones that are sustained, of course, then have that related discipline or action taken out of them. And we saw that those ranged from a verbal reprimand to a 10-day suspension, and in one case, a recommendation of termination. And I want to be very clear, the department recommended termination, and the officer decided to separate from the department prior to that occurring. So that was the recommendation, but not the ultimate finding for that discipline. And we had a total of 48 allegations as a result of these cases, so it gives you kind of a sense of where we were. Majority of them were found to be exonerated. Okay, and so we kind of divide our review into the improvements that we recommend for the process of investigating the cases themselves. So for the way that internal affairs and the department investigates the cases and resolves the cases. So these 4 are related to that piece of the process. You might recall that in January, we requested that the department change some of the language on the complaint form. So the public can submit a complaint on a written complaint form. They can also download that from your website. And we found that some of the language there was a little chilling to complainants, in our opinion. We noted that some of that language that we requested be removed was still there, and the department has committed to removing that language. We don't want anything that would be suggesting any punitive measures or that might dissuade someone from filing a complaint right on the complaint form. The department's committed to modifying that and perhaps has already done so. We also found that in some limited cases, the department was not following perhaps the best practices for the investigation protocols. And we found that on 2 fronts. One was, at times they did not conduct what, in our opinion, would be a full interview of the complainant or related witnesses. So sometimes the complainant provided the complaint form and it was quite robust. They had a lot of detail there. And the department used that form to base the allegations in the investigation. We opined that it would be a better practice to always interview the complainant. There might be something that rises to the surface in the course of a conversation. There might be some resolution that can be taken within that conversation. And so we would recommend that the department go ahead and interview, as is in their protocols. We also found that in some cases, the department perhaps did not fully investigate all of the allegations to the extent that we might want them to. And certainly the department is working on doing so in future investigations. One example that's in our report is an individual who alleged that that excessive force was used on him, and alleged that in the course of his medical treatment, he received a variety of diagnoses that would be related to that excessive force. In some cases, we find that the investigation might seek that kind of medical documentation to see if that was accurate. And here the investigation did not do so. So it's things like that at the margins that would probably assist with providing a full scope of investigation. We also continue to prompt the department on timeliness. We have definitely seen an improvement in timeliness of cases and how quickly they are being investigated and resolved. And we still noted some delay, and mostly it is due to the involved personnel not being available. They might be on military or medical leave, and they might not be available to receive the notification of discipline, and that causes a delay in the case. So certainly we're keeping track on those timelines and making sure that the department is fulfilling on their end with the requirements of timeliness. And finally, we saw some transparency for complainants, opportunities where the department might engage more. The department, to be clear, is already doing an extraordinary job informing complainants of the outcome of their complaints. In some jurisdictions, the department will send out a letter that says, "We got your complaint. Thanks a lot. Have a nice day." And the Las Cruces Police Department has been very proactive in providing a lot of detail related to the investigation, the outcomes, the allegations that were framed. But we did see that there was space also for improvement there. And in some cases, it would be like, if there is a delay in the investigation, letting the complainant know, hey, we're on it. It's going to take maybe 30 more days, 60 more days, and so on. We also commend the department in our report, and I'll highlight it here, for really having a lot of real-time communication with the public and the community. They have initiated a text kind of post-response survey through Spider technology, where the community can provide that real-time input as to the way that service was delivered. And we find that to be a really commendable progress step as far as interacting with the public and getting that real-time feedback on how are we doing and do we need to do better. So the other piece that we will look at is related kind of more to the systemic operations of the department. So now moving away from what internal affairs does specifically and more focused on the larger picture of the department's operations. We saw some instances that were remarkable only because they were so unique of officer professionalism, perhaps lacking. And we are sticklers for this subject. Use of profane language is always captured on your body-worn camera, and we will see that. It is, of course, something that is human nature, especially in highly charged situations. But we do like to note that officers are held to a higher standard, in particular as their interactions are always being recorded. We also want to highlight the transport of subjects by uninvolved officers. So at times, if there is a use of force that occurs and that subject is transported either to hospital or to jail, it is the same officer that used force who is transporting that subject. And we can certainly see that there would be some concerns with that. We want to make sure that the uninvolved officer is transporting, or that the department is sending out a transport officer to do so. Finally, we saw that there was a trend of focus on allegations related to report writing and other kind of procedural, operational things related to police work. So failures to appear in court, failures to upload body-worn camera or appropriately tag the incidents in your body-worn camera. What we believe to be the case is not that these things are happening more often, but that the department is catching them more often. And so we see that that's a trend that is actually positive. They're finding where officers might need some training, remedial counseling on how to do these kind of more basic operations that sometimes might get lost in the course of your day-to-day. The one area that we found, and I know that it is an ongoing kind of discussion here in council and elsewhere in the city, is the application of policy to all of the personnel that are within the police department, and I'm speaking specifically to code enforcement officers who, up until recently, it's my understanding, had their own procedure manual. And so there was some confusion when it came to investigations if the policies of the police department applied to these particular employees. And so I know that the department is actively working to incorporate anything that used to be a standalone policy right into the police department's general orders. That will help to streamline and reduce some of that confusion that's happening when an officer or other non-sworn personnel believes something might not apply to them. So that's an ongoing consideration, one that the department is very committed to. Finally, we saw in some very limited instances, we reviewed the uses of force. This is mostly outside of our scope of work. But if an allegation came in that was related to a specific use of force, typically an excessive use of force was the allegation, we then reviewed the accompanying use of force report. And out of those, we found that there was some room for improvement. The department has put together what they're calling their force review cadre. It is a team of 7 experts within the department that will do a more robust review of certain incidents that require that. We also noted that they are increasing training related to force incidents, and certainly we'll be looking out for those kinds of developments. And that is our presentation related to our report. I'm sure that there are ample questions, which we are happy to take on now.
Well, thank you, Teresa. Before we get to the questions, I just want to highlight something here real quick. So in the past, when we've had an outside police auditor, it was very common to find principals in that company, maybe a former police chief or high-ranking officer, maybe a deputy chief. But I didn't find any in your company. So what's interesting about that is there's been discussions in the past about citizens committee, right? But in looking at, and I just want to read this for my colleagues, and looking at the backgrounds of many of the people who work in this company, one was a chief attorney for the independent review for LA County, officer of independent review, a volunteer attorney for the independent review panel, director of the use of force section of LAPD, volunteer for LA County Citizens Commission, which is basically a citizens, past president of National Association of Police Oversight of Law Enforcement, certified group crisis intervention, field organizer for ACLU, and director of San Francisco Police Accountability. So I guess what I'm trying to say is when one might be geared towards more police, like I was talking about a different police auditor, yours is merely geared toward what the public, I think, wants to hear and see. And I just wanted to kind of share that with my colleagues in case if maybe they've already read the backgrounds of the company, but I just wanted to point that out. I think you all provide a whole different set of eyes. I mean, you have that experience from a large city, from LA and San Francisco. And to my knowledge, you probably don't know a whole lot of officers, probably none here. So you have nothing to hide, to basically to be able to weed out what it is that needs to be changed. So anyways, I just wanted to point that out. So with that, Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Magula and Mr. Conley. Well, Mayor, what you didn't mention is that Michael Janoko was with the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice under, what's his face? Patrick Nolan, or no, Patrick, well, anyway. Yeah, Patrick Nolan, Joanna's husband. No, Patrick Duvall. I'm sorry, Patrick Nolan. But anyway, so Michael actually, I think I've shared this before with council, maybe not, is that I was president of the Mexican-American Bar Association of Los Angeles County, and we were having a lot of problems since the fallout of Rodney King. And so we contacted Duvall, who was friends with members of the Langston Bar, and he sent, and so we met with Duvall. We met with Michael. I don't know if he remembers me. That was about 80,000 years ago. But at any rate, Michael is very well-versed because he would go to Los Angeles. He went out there, and now you're in Marina del Rey, but he did go out to Los Angeles, and I don't know what the DOJ did, but I do know that Michael is very well-versed in this field, so I think he's excellent. And so are you. Thank you. But I do have some questions, and I think the report on key demographics that you did, Ms. Magula, that you reported on, there was a zip code in there that I didn't recognize, 88047. Is that on the moon or something?
46, and that's Mesilla Park.
That's right.
Oh, 46. Oh, 47, I know where that number came from. But yeah, 46. So that was Mesilla Park, and they're included in this report, evidently? Or at least they call the city of Las Cruces?
Correct, by virtue of an internal investigation that occurred in that jurisdiction. So it was involving Las Cruces police officers.
Oh, I see.
But was not a response to a call for service there.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you. And then on your scope of audit, the audit was based on the reports that are available to you by the police department. So do you believe you had a full picture, or did you believe that you had a little, maybe presented with a pretty picture of what LCPD does? And the reason I'm asking is because this will be covered in the press, and as you know, most police departments throughout the country are under a magnifying glass, under the telescope. So I just want to make sure that this does represent, this should be representative, and maybe stated or not, that it represents most of the police force, and that the practice are, so yeah, so can you answer that, please, or address that?
Good afternoon, Counselor. So what I would say is that our experience of the department is that everything that is within our scope of work are things that we are being provided with without hesitation. We're getting full access and full cooperation. Our questions are being answered. But the key qualifier there is that our scope of work, as Teresa was mentioning, doesn't encompass everything that the department does. So, for example, use of force incidents. There are some jurisdictions where we kind of routinely audit the use of force review process, and we don't do that here. It's not part of the scope of work. There are just occasional instances where it comes to us via the complaint process, and it happens to be about use of force. So our experience of department management and our experience of the accountability measures that we have been entrusted with is a positive one. But in answer to your question, it's hard to know, what, in terms of the general operations and practices of the department, we're limited to what we see.
So the truth of the matter is that this may not be representative in the end. I mean, if you review what's presented to you.
So, well, we review what's presented to us, but what's presented to us are all the complaints that the public makes. So to that extent, we are getting a full picture. So when there is an issue that creates discord from some member of the public, there's some allegation of misconduct, or if it's a department-initiated internal investigation into officer misconduct. So when it comes to the allegation of misconduct arena, we feel like we are getting a complete sampling of what's out there. It's just other operational issues.
Okay, because there were a total of 16 complaints. I think I get more emails than that in a day with complaints. So you still believe that that's representative, and why? How?
Yeah, so thank you for that question, and Mr. Mayor and Councilor. I want to reiterate again that it is related to our scope. So our particular scope looks at complaints that rise to the level of a formal investigation. So The very technical term for that is an external complaint that is a category 1, if we want to get very in the weeds about it. We also review anything that the department, again, has initiated as an internal investigation. There are certainly complaints that come in that are related to other concerns that the department determines may not rise to the level of misconduct, or where a complainant ultimately decides that he or she does not want to do a formal investigation or a formal complaint.
So those aren't reflected here?
That's correct. Those are not reflected here.
It'd be good to set that, just put it out there so that there is a representative number of complaints coming in. And then as to page 7, philosophy of discipline, you say that you reported that you've talked to LCPD about this. To whom was this directed, and what exactly was directed? And since you've presented it to us, I think that we can ask all those questions, right? You opened the door. So thank you.
So your legal training is coming in handy today, Counselor.
Are you
You're
kidding all the
absolutely
time? I mean, when I have to, pay bills, I have to use, no.
Fair enough. So yeah, what we would say is we absolutely have engaged with our departments and with the department's leadership in terms of the individual reports, individual recommendations or cases where we've said, okay, good job catching the policy violation here, but we feel like in our experience, this conduct might merit a more significant consequence than what was given. And I want to be clear, it's not necessarily an extreme thing where it's the difference between somebody being, suspended for 30 days versus not, or being fired versus not. It's really more on the margins, to use an expression that Teresa used. But again, we feel like there are some situations, and I'll give you a very concrete example. If it's a repeat offense for a particular officer of the same conduct, we'd like to see that the discipline be ramped up a little bit to reflect the fact that, okay, there's some history of this and we want the intervention to be stronger.
So when you do have a repeat offender, for lack of better, with all due respect, LCPD, Danes and Dominguez, when you do have someone who's not falling into step with the rest, you can see that particular to a particular officer, to a specific officer? Is it particular to a specific officer, or is it just the pattern of information that's repeated?
So, well, it's that there are some allegations that come up repeatedly, kind of department-wide, and Teresa was mentioning report writing issues and issues with the body-worn cameras, and so those more broader systemic issues are things that we would absolutely single out on a department-wide basis. But I was speaking about, I didn't have anyone particular in mind, but yeah, we're talking about individual officers who might have repeat instances of a policy violation for the
So
same
do you get those names?
We get the records of the officers that are involved in the cases. So if there's any relevant disciplinary history, that's part of what we review.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
All right. And then, at page 14, I believe, maybe 15, policy and training recommendations, I was wondering, what exactly do you mean when something isn't happening, but more often than not, not happening more often, but being reported. So if it's not happening more often, how do you know they didn't report it or didn't report? How can you measure that if it wasn't reported?
Yeah, so what we hypothesize, and of course could be proved one way or the other, is that the allegations related to those types of procedural concerns are being caught more often by virtue of the investigative process. So if a complaint is related to, say, the traffic stop and an officer's perhaps unbecoming conduct during that traffic stop. In the course of the investigation, the department may find that, hey, the officer didn't actually appear in court for that particular traffic stop. And so that allegation is framed in addition to the original complaint. So they're in the course of doing the investigations, finding more things to frame allegations and to counsel the officers on.
Okay. And then, I understand that now. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then, on page 13, you indicated that you continued to focus on timeliness and that OIR prompted the police department. And then you said delay is due to communication failures. I believe, words to that effect.
Yeah, insofar as any delay in the case, perhaps the complainant does not know about. And so that's where I was speaking to the department having an opportunity to send maybe a follow-up letter saying, we are investigating this, it's taking longer than we think it might take, or than we originally thought it might take. And so that kind of communication with the member of the public is very vital, so that the public knows what's going on.
So those are the corrective measures that you take at each step.
That's right.
Okay, that's all. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. And let me just add something here, Counselor. I know when you say you receive a lot of complaints, I get a lot of those too as well, because I'm usually copied when they send to you. But in all fairness to our police officers, a lot of it is things that are out of their control. I mean, they arrest these perpetrators, and there's small crimes, and they're back on the street within hours. So I blame the legislature and the judicial system primarily as well. And I just want to point out one thing that I enjoyed reading in here regarding internal affairs practice. It says, as reported in January, we again found LCPD's internal affairs practice to be robust and effective. And the department has shown its responsiveness to the auditing process by effectively implementing most of our recommendations in the short 6-month time frame. So I appreciate that. Yeah. Councilor Bencomo, Councilor Abeta.
Thank you, and thank you for the report and sending it to us on a good manner. It was very lengthy, so I appreciated having time to review it. I have a lot of questions, and they may not be very well organized, so bear with me. There's a couple instances where I felt like I was receiving some mixed messaging, and maybe even with additional presentation today. One of them actually being around the transparency issue in the closeout letters. I think in the report I read at one point it said some of these letters were misleading. And so today you said the department's doing an extraordinary job at transparency. So to me, those are mixed messages, right? I'm curious about these closeout letters. Who is writing them? What do they look like? What kind of, is there someone reviewing them for? To me, I think empathy matters significantly, particularly when we're talking about someone who is a victim of any particular crime and is wanting to get closure. I'm curious if you can tell us more about that process, and if I know the department is still considering that recommendation. So then I guess my second question to that is, at what point does the department then fully decide to take on the recommendation that you have made? And then, so what does that whole process look like?
Let me take the first one. Good afternoon, and thank you for the question. So I absolutely understand your point. We are very interested, as you are, in the effectiveness of the notification letters to the complainant, because oftentimes that is the way that they are going to ideally be satisfied. Even if the result is not what they wanted, they'll be satisfied that the department took the complaint seriously, that they understood the allegations and approached them appropriately. And I think there is room for the kind of gestures and interactions that you're talking about. In terms of the discrepancy that you noticed, the specific thing that we said about the complaint letters being misleading actually is there are two sides to it. Misleading, not great, but the reason why they're misleading is something that Teresa was just talking about, which is that oftentimes the department is going to go beyond the specifics of that person's complaint to look at all aspects of the officer's behavior, and it might discover that's not something that the complainant was upset about, but we see that this is a performance problem, so we addressed it. And sometimes the wires get crossed in terms of the letter writing, and so they will say the allegation was sustained, and it's confusing. It's misleading in the sense that the complainant might be led to believe, I was affirmed in my allegation that the officer was discourteous or handled that call appropriately, and that may not be what happened at all. So I would defer to the department about your question of who writes them and who vets them, and is there room for more, but we are certainly sympathetic to that approach.
Yeah, I mean, Chief, you don't necessarily have to answer right now, but that is something that I would like to hear feedback from you in terms of what those letters look like. You don't have to have an answer today.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, to Steve's point, our letters or our complaint would come in alleging a certain violation or a certain a violation of a policy. So when we focus the officer on it, this is what we're focusing on, this one policy. After the investigation is completed, that policy wasn't, the investigation found it wasn't violated, but we found other violations, report writing, whatever it is, as ancillary issues. So the letter would go out to the complainant. The complainant gets a letter and sees that they were sustained. They feel that they were affirmed. Instead of doing that, what we're doing now is letting the complainant know exactly what the outcome was. And so if they were sustained, your complaint did not find that the charge was, or the policy was violated, but we did find this. Lieutenant Gutierrez probably can speak to the letters that we've had to change because of this process. And we welcome this very much, because not only as far as transparency and being able to speak to the complainants at the end of the investigation, the transparency and being able to speak to the complainants at the beginning of the investigation is where we're really finding a lot of success in helping our processes. And that's one of the issues that came up as part of this, as far as transparency. If you'd like to know what the letters say exactly, I could let Lieutenant Gutierrez come on up and speak to
No, I
that.
imagine they vary from case to case, but I think for me, particularly because of the one case that stood out to me in the report, that was pretty significant complaint. That's what, for me, that's where this empathy piece comes in, and how are we addressing people who are complaining about an assault? Like, that's pretty significant. And is there something more than just the letter as well? A phone call, a conversation?
That's, Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, that's one of the processes that we're fixing and we're putting into common practice.
Great.
Because of this process.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief. I will move on to my next question. The other piece, this like mixed messaging, oh goodness, let me find my notes, was around this philosophy of discipline, which I think I'm looking forward to this matrix, and I have some questions about that in a second. But straight from the report, there was a statement that said, an overly lenient disciplinary response runs the risk of diminishing the influence of the process on future officer performance. Noting that there had been leniency in some of the discipline. I'm curious, then later in that same paragraph it says, that being said, we would not advocate for significant increases in discipline in the aforementioned cases. So to me, I'm hearing there's leniency and you don't have to really change that much about it. To me, those are a little bit conflicting, and I'd like to understand better how we should approach leniency, disciplinary leniency in situations particularly that call for more significant discipline.
So I think that there are, the point that we were trying to make there is that the discipline process operates on multiple levels at the same time. And one level is, what does this individual officer need in order for his or her behavior to be corrected? And because there are a range of individual circumstances, the officer's experience, past history, other factors that may influence the way the department approaches it, it can be appropriate for a consequence to be relatively mild relative to another officer who's done much the same thing, but maybe the aggravating factors are there in terms of the past history that we were referring to, or the failure to cooperate fully with the investigation, or whatever the case may be. Our point is that while we look, I think the department has taken a very, very individualized approach. If I can generalize a little bit, they have said, hey, what does this specific officer need as a result of this? And there's a place for that, but we also advocate saying you have to have a standard so that the next officer that does it isn't going to come in and say, well, why am I getting 3 days off when this person got verbal counseling and it was the same policy violation? That's a perfectly valid question for the second officer to raise. So that's why I think the department, there's room for the department to say, hey, as much as it's appropriate to take individual circumstances into account, we need to get some baselines here to make this more consistent.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the philosophy of discipline and this matrix that may be coming out, I think, to be very frank, some of what stood out to me the most in this report was instances of lack of truthfulness and where that should fall in line in terms of priority of discipline. And to me, that seems pretty significant. It should be top priority. And there was an instance, I think, in on page 62, I think, where the memos were, there was a statement on here that says, during his first administrative interview, the officer made several statements that were inconsistent with the evidence and was not forthcoming with all information related to the incident. And this led to a low-level suspension. To me, that's significant. Truthfulness matters. I think if we have a culture that you don't have to tell the truth when it comes to a thing, and it won't really, it'll be okay because you're hardworking, which was also a statement made in this report. To me, that's pretty significant. I'd like to understand how we are taking that seriously and what recommendations you are making and how the department is responding to that. And if you're not making those recommendations, I certainly am in this moment.
So, Mr. Mayor and Councilor, we absolutely agree with you about the crucial importance of truthfulness. It is at the heart of public trust in the police and credibility at every level. So even if it's a minor operational thing, it still matters to be able to count on the police being credible in that regard. So we would be inclined to agree with you. We have communicated that view to the police, and we look forward to seeing how reforms in the discipline process continue to evolve.
Thank you. Chief, in terms of, I would love to hear from you what you think of this question and how you're thinking about formalizing this matrix, and particularly how you want to handle instances of lack of truthfulness.
Mayor and Councilor Bencomo, let me start by saying truthfulness to a police officer is everything. If you've been found to be untruthful in a criminal investigation or administrative investigation, it affects your ability to testify in court for the rest of your career. It significantly impacts the way you can do policing from there on out. Most times, police officers are terminated because of truthfulness. The case that you're referring to was treated with the utmost attention when we found an inconsistency in the way the questions were being answered, which had us compel the officer in that one investigation to a polygraph examination, and it was passed. We don't take those things lightly within the LCPD.
Thank you, Chief. You are talking about this matrix then in terms of the philosophy of discipline. That's something that you're working on?
Yes, ma'am. Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, the chart of sanctions that we're working on, I'd like to take complete credit for it, but Attorney Vega Brown would actually announce or kind of brought this to our attention that there's other departments that are doing this. And when we're looking at some of the discipline that's handed out, we found, based off conversations that we had, that we have a starting point to go off of. It would help us in being more consistent. There was some discussion that was had over a discipline recommendation that was made by a sergeant. It's called it, I believe he used the word willful disregard, and this was in reference to calling in reports. So we looked at it as a police chief and head of the department, as well as all of our supervisors. I asked them, and I asked myself, where did I fail whenever anybody's just sustained for anything? Did we fail? Did the process fail? That's what we look at first. So when I looked at that one, and specifically that one, I looked, was there a willful disregard? There was a suspension handed out for that, but in looking for ways to find out whether or not it was an intentional act, I could not find it to be intentional or willful in that matter. There was still some progressive discipline that was issued based off of what I looked at and based off of the discipline recommendation. So there was sanctions in place for that, but there wasn't a willful disregard. And because there's some possible subjectiveness to the way our discipline is handed out, that's why we're starting to look at this chart of sanctions that we're involving a lot of officers in, and we'll be involving Attorney Vega Brown as well, so we can look at it and make sure that we have a good starting point when it comes to discipline.
Thanks for that, Chief. And I know that personnel matters, you know, they don't belong to the City Council necessarily, but I think because we're working towards building trust with the community, transparency, that we have somewhat of a public conversation when you get closer to developing this matrix, or I'm sorry, I forget what you just called it.
Chart of sanctions.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Chief. I think my questions may come back to the OIR folks, and I might not have many more actually. On page 9, where you begin to list out some of the specific cases, and you have, like, there's a case in here that involves, I think, 3 officers, right? That's how I'm reading the chart correctly? Okay. And then some of them are sustained, some of them are exonerated. I'm curious, when it comes to these kinds of cases where you have multiple officers and you have multiple outcomes, I guess what I came out thinking when I read this was, how do we look at duty to intervene in situations like this? And is that within your scope? How are you thinking about that? Are you making recommendations in terms of duty to intervene?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Bencomo. So when you're absolutely interpreting that correctly. So if the first column there has simply, for example, the first case there is transport officer, and there's 4 related allegations. Those are all for the same officer. If there was multiple officers, we listed them out, officer 1, 2, and so on. So yes, certainly you're seeing that and interpreting it correctly. As to your question for duty to intervene, typically that type of evaluation would occur in the use of force investigations. And so those particular cases, unless they are directly related to a complaint that rises to the level that our scope encompasses, we would not be seeing those. And so certainly I believe the department, in the cases we've reviewed, has looked at the duty to intervene, but none of the ones in this particular scope, in this particular period, involved any allegations of a failure of the duty to intervene.
Okay. I hope that when you're coming up with this chart of sanctions, wow, that's hard for me to repeat. I hope that there is a piece in there about a duty to intervene and what it looks like when that is not done so. And the disciplinary of that. So I appreciate it. Just one last question, sorry, everyone. In the case number 2020II,
004. These are the assault allegation cases that were sustained. I'm curious about the timeline in terms of when the allegations were made, the investigation happened, and then the officer then resigned before receiving any disciplinary. To me, this was potentially the most concerning case of all of these. I'm wondering what that timeline was. Was it short and that's why the officer resigned? Or was there enough room for, before disciplinary, that the officer said, you know what, I'm going to leave before anything major happens?
So in this particular one, if I'm recalling correctly, there was not a concern related to timeline, the exception being that I believe the officer had some leave period and so was unable to receive the notification of discipline. And so there was, to your point, Councilor Bencomo, there was an opportunity perhaps for that officer to have some kind of self-evaluation, but it was not the department's failure to proactively take this on in a timely way.
Okay, thank you. You did mention that at the beginning. I guess the last couple things I'll say are just sort of comments and statements. Lots of takeaways, honestly, but two big takeaways for me were, one, there was instances of officer-involved DUIs and perhaps domestic violence, and I think to me that speaks to a level of mental health assessments within the department and how we are going about that and taking that very seriously. I'm someone that deeply believes in restorative justice, and that doesn't have a boundary. It doesn't stop at where police officers are working, right? To me, that goes beyond that there as well. And if there is mental health care needs that are not being addressed within the department, to me, that's pretty significant and serious. And we'll have these kinds of consequences. So that's, to me, why it's so important. The second one, I think, is this pattern that you've mentioned in terms of reporting to domestic violence cases and de-escalation. This is a concern that I have continued to have. I don't know if you've been informed, but we recently voted in and created a crisis intervention team with social workers that I hope their scope can also include domestic violence, because frankly, when we're talking about victims of domestic violence, we should be having mental health professionals and social workers respond. In addition, I know there's procedure when it comes to domestic violence where police officers are necessary, and I just think this crisis intervention team hopefully will be able to resolve some of those concerns. But I do continue to have concerns about matters of de-escalation and how the department is addressing those, and having the officers truly own and practice that on the field, and not just say, well, we've trained them, but what does it look like to actually implement them? So thank you, and thank you all for letting me take this much time.
Okay, we have Councilors Abeyta, Gondara, and Coran. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much for the presentation. I would like to recognize that we do have our chair and former Councilor Ekman in the audience, who sits on our oversight committee, another area where we have seen a few items come before us. And I did want to mention a bit of a comment that was submitted by the chair back in July to the mayor, and I'm just going to read it for it because it does deal with policy and how we kind of review. And it says, it would be helpful if the Oversight Committee could review the improvements recommended by the OIR through a mechanism of displaying the adoption of the recommendations, how the recommendations were implemented, and whether or not improvements are indeed raising the quality of police actions and behaviors. Without this mechanism for recording improvements and recommendations, the Oversight Committee is unable to assure the City Council that the external auditor model is a benefit to the city. And I share this just as you've pointed out, that some recommendations have been taken, some haven't. If we're not given, a lot of information on that, then we're not quite sure of that quality. So I do want to point that out. And I think it goes a little bit with another policy item on how information gets to you all. And do you see any gaps on where, and it could be with your scope of contract, on if an incident occurs and how it gets to you, what are common gaps that you see within this industry, and are we addressing those in your contract?
Go ahead. So thank you. If I can speak to your first point, Councilor, the observation about recommendations, I think, is a very legitimate one. And we, in fact, have a couple of clients that we're working with right now that it's kind of built into the annual cycle where whenever we make recommendations on an annual basis, and we might have 17 recommendations, and as part of the process, the department is responsible for responding to all 17. We've had other clients that we've worked with where we did an after-action report on a significant incident, and a couple years later they brought us back to say, hey, you made 53 recommendations. Can you go back and say, did the department implement these, and if not, why not? And so that is a very common feature, and I think there's a lot of legitimacy to it. So we thank the Oversight Committee for the observation. In terms of your other question, and I've already blanked on it. What was the actual question you had for us?
If within the scope of your contract, if you see that there are gaps on how we get information from the time the incident occurs to how it might get to you, if there are gaps.
So I would say that again, within the four corners of our understanding with the city and with the department, we get everything on a timely basis. They are following the procedure that is in place to the letter. And when we have an issue or concern or a question about something, we get an immediate response when we reach out to Lieutenant Gutierrez or someone else to get some clarification. So we're not concerned about aspects of what we're reviewing being held back from us or not arriving to us in the appropriate timeline. But at the risk of repeating ourselves, we only know what we know, right? And we are working within the parameters of our scope of work. And so as far as other issues that might be of concern to the council or community, we may have some gaps there that are relevant.
Okay, thank you. And Councilor Bencomo kind of brought this up a little bit ago, but just to kind of look at that of timelines again, and from your review of all these cases, from the time a incident happens to the point of possible resolution, are we within standards of making sure that is happening? Are things taking a little bit longer? How does that look like?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilor Abeyta. I wanted to just jump back to the previous question quickly and do an add-on, which is that the department is tracking internally each of the recommendations that we provide. They have a position that they call the compliance sergeant, and that sergeant is diligently tracking each of the recommendations. We try to follow up and loop back and make sure, hey, did you do the things that we requested? But as Steve mentioned, it is not in a formal capacity that we're doing so, but they are doing it internally. To the question of timeliness, in the first report where we spoke to you in January, we were concerned that the timelines were a little lengthy and a little beyond what we see are most effective practices. We've seen the department tighten that up quite a bit in the time that we've been reviewing. And so with the exception of those instances where the officer is on some kind of leave and cannot receive their notification, or if the officer is choosing to do some form of administrative appeal, then we see that perhaps the case was taking a little longer to get to us. But those are typically factors that are outside of that departmental control. So they're typically getting the cases resolved within about 90 days, and we believe that that's an appropriate standard.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And then I think my quick comments on some of what we read. For me, one of the other, I think, really concerning items is that of the comments about professionalism and how it relates to everything from de-escalation, to transparency and things like that. And I know that there are a lot of reasons for a lot of things, but I think just as we all have to be held to very high standards, this is also another area that if you lose that public trust, especially in these areas, that it's very hard to get it back, and it is also not the best way that we can serve our community. So I hope that we are addressing some of the, all of these issues with the seriousness that it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. And before I get to Mayor Pro Tem, my response to Chairman Ekman's letter was that I was going to suggest to you, my colleagues, that that be included as part of his EFO's evaluation, either quarterly or semi-annually. Yeah. Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Mayor, I think Viola has something to add.
Sorry, Viola?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, councilors, thank you. Just as a follow-up, I wanted to advise the council that the current contract does allow for follow-up audits. And the contract says specifically that we can have the OIR group conduct follow-ups as requested by the city. And then at that point, then can determine implementation of those recommendations. So we have at any point an ability to follow up on any particular case or all the cases as deemed fit by the council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Viola. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation and for being here and touring our city. I think it's always good to get a, it's a perspective in that way. My questions are around some clarification. Councilor Flores was leaning in that direction of asking more specifically what the scope of work entailed. And I think it's always important, and I'd like to see that you, in your presentation, review that with us, because there's people new in the audience, people who are viewing that are not familiar. I mean, we get lots of different things, and I forget what very specifically those are. So if you can include it in the packet as a one-pager, that would be helpful. If you can very quickly run through them for the public, that is also helpful. The scope of work, if you'd review that with us.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem Gandara. So our scope of work, as we've now mentioned a number of times, is limited. Mm-hmm. It is the cases that the department has determined are external complaints, so from members of the public, that rise to the level of potential misconduct. Okay, so those would be any cases where the allegations could result in a violation of department's policies, general orders. There are, as I mentioned, other complaints that come in that do not rise to that level of formal investigation. Those are outside our scope.
Okay.
The other area that we review are those internal investigations. Those would be the areas where the department has initiated, through the course of their own findings of misconduct within the department, they've initiated an internal investigation. So that doesn't necessarily require a member of the public coming in and saying an officer did X, Y, or Z, but rather the department learns of potential misconduct and investigates internally. Those are also within our scope.
Thank you. Did I hear you correctly that the use of force is not? Okay.
That's correct. It is not in our scope of
Unless
work.
it comes within those 2 or 3 guidelines
That's
that you
correct.
mentioned, or
So,
deliverables.
Correct. Mm-hmm. So an example, if an individual, a member of the public, and several of our cases had this set up, alleges that excessive force was used against them, the department internally does a use of force review, okay? As a result of the complaint and our seeing that excessive force is one of the allegations, either the department provides or we request that use of force review. So it's a whole separate stream. And so we will review those in those very specific cases where an allegation is related. Now, there are many uses of force that receive that internal review process that we do not ever see, because they are outside of our scope. So it's only by virtue of, oh, here's an excessive force allegation, let's look at that, that we see them.
I appreciate that. I'm leaning into asking you, you do this all over the nation.
That's correct.
And what, in your opinion, is the best contract that you have that really helps, council and people get to the crux of what their issues and concerns are? Can you give us sort of the download about what those are? And then I'm going to say to staff, I find it very difficult because the contract we are 2 now councils different. We don't have anybody that represents us in there, and we are now 2 chiefs different, right? So council was very clear back then what we wanted to see, and I want to say that some of that got negotiated off. And that doesn't help us, nor does it. Right. Nor can we go back and say, oh, no, remember, this is for us, for council, and for the public, absolutely, first and foremost. But there's nothing that we can negotiate with unless No, not during the committee, if you will, right, that goes and negotiates this contract. And so I find that very difficult and disturbing, because council has certain things that we'd like to see happen. And use of force was one of them, if I remember correctly, and I'm looking at Councilor Ekman back there. But that's like 6 years ago, 5 years ago. I mean, who remembers every detail? But anyway, I think, and I'll say that publicly to Viola and others, I want to see use of force put on the contract, and I know you were looking at doing that, but please go ahead and answer my question. That was like the best contract that you think really gets to the crux of.
I was afraid you were going to do this. And this is usually a Mike Giannakko question, but thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Mr. Mayor. So we have a lot of different arrangements with a lot of different jurisdictions, and we always make the point that it is not our place to say this is what you need or this is what, better than this. We try to be responsive to the individual needs and preferences of the community, and one of the things about oversight in general is we've been affiliated with the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, the NACOL group, that is probably the best resource nationally for all the different oversight.
Repeat that again for me?
Yeah, it's NACOL, N-A-C-O-L-E, NACOL.org. They have a great website, and we're all members of it, and they do a lot of excellent work in terms of providing resources for communities to just say, this is what's out there, and these are the different options that are available. So we, as I said, we have worked in a lot of different contexts, and so we are very, very deferential to what the community needs and what the individual council is most excited about in terms of what they want to try to accomplish. That said, I will tell you, we do have contracts with communities that are extremely robust in terms of real-time actual monitoring of investigations, sometimes participating in investigations, and we do use of force audits for different agencies. So there is a lot. Critical incident review is a big part of our practice, and that obviously those high-profile incidents generate a lot of attention, and we have a lot of experience dealing holistically with those events. So it really does vary, and we are very, very deferential to the preferences of each place that we work in.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And then you had a couple of paragraphs speaking to the use of force in some of the investigations and auditing that you were conducting. I appreciate the force review cadre. I think that will be very helpful moving forward. And I'm wondering, Chief, we also have a police, what are we calling it? Police committee? Police.
Public safety.
Public safety, there we go, public safety. And I like to have some of those conversations about how it's rolling out and what you're finding. I think those are important things. We just need to find ways that it's being discussed, but also funneled it to council and to the public. And I think that's, for me, really important. And then I'll move into the customer service metric. I think important to note that the LCPD responded to 54,552 calls for service. That's significant. And as far as complaints, it was 0.06% of those calls for service. Do you find that statistically relevant? It's kind of like, is that the going number for that amount of calls? And if not, then what do we do to inform the public, right? There's numerous things that we do. We have a transparency page on our website. We have that number that people can call, both internally and externally. But some suggestions around that and what you think about that spread there. It doesn't seem significant.
So, Mr. Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, that last part that you just said, when you say it doesn't seem statistically significant, what do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is for that amount of calls, is that we're getting those number of complaints. Is that relevant to that number?
I think it's yes and no, if I can give you a real lawyerly answer to it. And so what I would say is it's absolutely relevant in the sense of giving the public and giving council members and giving folks like us a sense of the incredible high volume of encounters that the police have on a daily basis, the vast majority of which are resolved effectively, professionally, and without a complaint emerging. When it comes to the number of complaints, we are interested in that, but that number alone is a starting point and not the end of the analysis.
Sure.
And it could, to your point, it could very much be a function of, well, we don't have confidence that anybody's going to take it seriously. We don't know where to go. We didn't even know the police investigated complaints. So there are a lot of factors that can go into it, but I would say it is absolutely worth having the reminder of the very high volume of stuff that the department's involved in.
Yes, and I think that's important, where they have handled those things professionally and expeditiously, and I think those are important. But I'm interested in this spider tech, and I think I was a recipient of that. There was a fender, someone hit me. It happened up here on Campo a few months back. I made the call, but then you get, I think it's the text that says, "Thank you for your call. We appreciate it. This is the things that we're doing." I think specific. So like, oh, this is cool, really cool, and I think Chief and DC Daines, we need to let the public know that that's something that automatic, like if you call, these are things that are going to happen. I think it's important that our public is aware of that. Let's see, I too had a bunch of training is my next thing. I've been concerned about the kind of training, and I know that our number of reports as it relates to domestic violence is on the unfortunately on the uptick, and there have been times when I have felt like the training, specifically just having someone come and talk about domestic violence, I feel like we need to take this very seriously in a number of ways, and I want to lean on your expertise and experience of what other communities doing when they see this kind of domestic violence in their community, and what are their local PD in terms of training. Specifically, I'm looking at really professionalizing that training and bringing in national speakers, specifically working with our DV partners in town, and Mr. I think you're familiar, David Mandel, who's a guru in addressing domestic violence. And so just really wanting to hear from you what you weren't very specific, and I think the chief and others responded that they're doing this training. There was a change in their orders, and there was a training in February 2022, I think I read. So I'll stop there and you can answer that.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem. As far as what the department is doing, exactly what you have commented on here, and I would like to defer that question to Chief and others who might have more information about the specifics of training, because again, it's something that we did not review as part of the scope, what type of training and is it appropriate. As far as what is happening nationwide, certainly much of the items that you highlighted in your comments are what departments are trying to take on. So bringing in the community that is knowledgeable in this field, crisis intervention practitioners, social workers, others who have this professional expertise and background to better handle, potentially better handle the calls that are coming in related to these kinds of incidents. Now, certainly there is space for the police officer's response and for public safety's response in this. But to the extent that other jurisdictions are involving, as I've heard mentioned here, having those teams that are together, a crisis intervention, a mental health practitioner or others that can ride in with the officers.
Yeah.
Certainly something that others are trying and seems to be effective at this time.
Yes, I know we're seeing some good results other places, so looking forward to that when it begins here. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor. Those are all my questions for now.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. So I just sent an email to EFO, copied Eric and Jennifer and yourself, asking if that could be, the use of force could be added to the scope of work, and if so, then they'll probably contact OIR for a price and then bring back a resolution, and if council wants to add that to it, then move forward. Okay. Okay, next, Councilor Coran, and then Councilor Graham.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for your presentation and for the report, which I thought was really helpful in making clear a lot of things. And I would say, and not that I would argue against us expanding the scope of your work, but I would say that you did indicate a number of times things that I think allude to this conversation about use of force and de-escalation. You mentioned the temperature being increased by human interactions, and I think what I'm curious to hear actually is now knowing that you all don't necessarily provide recommendations in how to address it, I'm curious, I know that I've heard from the chief that this is really part of the conversation of what sort of the evaluation of both discipline and the types of conversations you're having are the use of force cadre. I'm curious to hear if the chief would be willing to share some of the concrete actions. I think that you've already taken a number of things, and it seemed like from your report that accountability was already happening. So I would really like for you to share some of those concrete things that have been happening that you all have been doing, especially related to reducing the temperature of interactions.
Mayor, Councilor Coran, as far as, to be clear, we review every use of force. We have an internal system called Blue Team. An officer has to use force at a call. He submits it. At the end of the day, it's reviewed by the supervisor, and it goes all the way into IA. We have had internal investigations where a use of force reviewer would look at it and say, this looks like it was excessive, we need to look into it, and then it would result in an internal investigation. The use of the cadre puts more eyes on it. So we decided through some recommendations made by OIR to look at each use of force in a more robust way. So by having more eyes on it, and the number 7 came up because that's the number of use of force reviewers that we have within the department. Ideally, we'd like to have more, but it takes some training. It takes some specialized training that the officers have to go through. So that's what we're doing as far as the cadre. And I'm sorry, your last question.
The other thing is, and I know that you've mentioned this or alluded to it, but when things come up in these, so these are sort of not necessarily use of force interactions, but I know that there is sort of a conversation about if they're indicators of a potential, sort of to the idea of progressive interface and progressive discipline, sort of intervening early with any officers that might have those sort of conditions that raise the temperature, and how that works within the department. And I know that you all are taking proactive steps to address that.
Mayor, Councilor Coran, to your point, we just actually had an interpersonal communications course where we have officers that are finding themselves in uses of force a little more often than other officers. So we looked at, what they're doing wrong, and or could they de-escalate situations a little bit more effectively? Could they communicate a little more effectively? We found that there was a need for this class, and we selected people or officers that have been in situations that they could have probably used the communication skills a little better. So we asked them to attend this class, and we just actually just completed it. We had 20 officers, but this is something that we want to continue as an ongoing process for the department.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I feel like I just want to point out that you all really are triangulating your experiences, the data that exists, and the feedback that you give. And I think that's really meaningful in terms of this process. So I just really appreciate that you all are open to that and thinking about it. So thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Graham.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for presentations and for
being so thoughtful in your answers, too. I guess the beauty of going last is that most of my questions have already been addressed. I have one really micro question remaining. We were talking about the modification of language on the complaint intake forms. So that is page number 15 on yours, 21 of 170 on the larger packet. And you'd mentioned that you were recommending removing the under penalties as provided by law pursuant to ... Is that something that should stay on the form legally, though? If a complainant would be subject to charges if they did falsely accuse an officer, I understand the spirit of making the form seem as open and cooperative as possible, but would that cause a problem for us if that situation did present itself? Like I said, it's a super micro question.
Teresa is usually our micro person. So, Mr. Mayor and Councilor Graham, thank you for the question. Some of it comes down to technicalities, and I will tell you, in California law, we have literally been going through this issue with different agencies for 20 years, because the case law has flipped back and forth with people making First Amendment claims, and it actually is a really good question and a complicated question. I would actually defer today, and we can actually do some research and get back to you, because it's a great question. As far as New Mexico law and what the status of it is regard to the federal litigation relating to this point. But yeah, our emphasis is on the chilling aspect of it. But you make a very fair point that there should be a fair warning component too, if in fact they are subject to prosecution for using the system irresponsibly.
All right, great, thanks. And yeah, I'd appreciate follow-up on that. And then I think no further questions. So much of what I was thinking about has already been expressed very eloquently by my colleagues. But I do remain, in my very brief tenure up here, the overarching theme is mental and behavioral health. And I think all of us have alluded to that. And I can only imagine, I recognize no police department, LCPD, no department anywhere operates in a bubble. But you end up under very intense scrutiny in what I think is, it's probably fair to say, a job that has changed a lot, especially in recent decades, in terms of how much you are dealing with things that people go to school for lots and lots of years just specifically to do that job. So I think I just want to add my voice to the spirit of collaboration, and that we as a city are trying to address this on many different fronts, because I don't want to see it be something that is pointed just specifically at the police department, when in fact they're just, they are responding to symptoms of much, much larger challenges that are going on. And I'm just happy that the conversation evolved in a way that is recognizing that as well. And that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and get to the public comment part. And if I could just have, by a show of hands, who wishes to speak? I'm sorry? Well, no, they're not done completely. We're going to let the public, and then we're going to probably bring them back they may even have to answer some questions. I'm sorry? What? Oh, Councilor Bengomo, you...
Mayor, as long as you allow me to speak after public comment,
Yeah,
I'm going to have 2 more questions.
Yeah, of course. So how many members here of the public wish to speak? This is a public comment section on this. Nobody? Okay. All right, Councilor.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have 2 follow-up questions. I vaguely remember us having a conversation last time about the issue of body-worn cameras and them not being turned on. And there was some sort of software we had discussed back then about like voice activated or something. I'm curious if there's follow-up on that. Or did I dream that, Chief? Pretty sure we talked about it.
Mayor, Councilman Como, the technology that you're talking about, there's several pieces that go on with these cameras, and it ties into our tasers and things of that nature. We're still trying to get the money to put together so we can get that technology. We actually have some quotes that we're working on right now. But as far as our policies on the body-worn camera, they pretty much got to be on almost all the time. And that's really cleared up that issue. The comment was made earlier that it was getting used to it. Old-timers like me didn't have cameras when we first started. We had these little clunky cassette recorders that we had to activate only in certain circumstances because of the legislation and the technology coming together at the same time. Newer officers have no issues just tapping. It took a while to get the older officers used to doing it, but we're seeing the instances where the cameras aren't activated really reduce.
Thanks, Chief. And my next question is for you as well, I think. The cadre that is being formed, 7 people, right? All in the department?
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, that's correct. They're use of force experts that go through specialized training so that they can take a closer look at uses of force and match them up to, policy, case law, things of that nature.
Yeah, and I understand for sure that it's highly technical and you'd have to be trained to really understand those pieces. And I think it's important for me to note that often this is where there's lack of trust between community and the department in terms of who's overseeing what, right? And it continues to be police officers overseeing use of force by police officers, and that creates some mistrust. And I'm curious if there's any room for this cadre for citizen participation.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, we'd have to have that conversation internally. Again, the cadre looks at it from a law enforcement perspective. And I will again point out that we have seen violations, and they have led to internal investigations and discipline. So we do have a very good internal system, in my opinion.
And I note that, Chief, because there is conversation happening right now in our community about citizen oversight, and just wondering where there is room for improvement in terms of communication. I think, frankly, people are looking at that because they feel like there is a lack of that kind of transparency and line of communication. And so if it's not that, again, because I get that it's technical and people go their whole careers training to review these kinds of things, and I think there's, on the other side, there's a perception that that there's very little transparency, is what I will say to that. Thank you.
Well, I just want to first thank Steve and Teresa for your presentations and coming here today, and Chief and your team for all that you all deal with. I mean, you're the only department in the city that really gets scrutinized, that has their own outside auditor, and has this type of report. But I have to, earlier when I began my discussion as to the background of OIR, I did so not knowing that I was going to respond to Councilor Bencomo. I think that you couldn't ask for a better organization, because you all have actually, I don't know if you've actually picketed or I don't know, maybe you even got arrested. But anyways, it sounds like you all actually, as organizers at one point in your life, and you have that education and know what to look for. And that's why I've always been, I don't know of very few departments that have the type of transparency that the LCPD does. I don't know how many departments, I was reading how many clients you have, but I think that when we started this back in 2009 or 10, I can't remember exactly when we started doing outside auditing, police audits, it's really worked out well, in my opinion. I mean, I see how other cities deal with constituents and complaints. We are by far have got to be one of the leaders in dealing with that. I mean, I know my colleagues are very conscientious. They don't like to just not respond to people. And I think the team here at LCPD and City Las Cruces as a whole does the same. They want to make sure everything's responded to and dealt with. And so I mean, this is, and I think Councilor Graham said it so well. You know, the police work has evolved so much throughout the years. I still remember my next door neighbor. He retired as a lieutenant at Las Cruces Police Department, and over 20 years. And I think he only pulled his weapon out twice. But he retired in the 70s. And it's just a whole different ballgame now. And so having to deal with so many issues and all the things, the facets, and the people who just, it's almost like they just want to harass the police. I mean, some of them, not all of them, but the ones that I've seen. But nonetheless, I just want to thank you for what you all do, and thanks to our Las Cruces Police Department for what you all do, because it sounds like you've been very cooperative, which is good. And my colleagues as well for their support. And so looks like, depending on how we can work out an additional scope of work, we'll see, you know, and it's good, because I think if we cover that as well as what we're currently doing right now, what more could you ask for, really, when you get right down to it? You've got a whole fresh set of eyes who have that experience to be able to see exactly what Las Cruces Police Department is doing and what if anything, they could do to better themselves. So, okay. Thank you very much. Have a safe trip home. Did you guys get a chance to taste any of the chili when you were here? Tonight's the night, okay. All right, so next we're going to go to 3.3, Progress Report on Realize Las Cruces, Catherine Harrison Rogers and Friesa Nichols Company.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, bear with me 1 second while I get this presentation loaded. All right. Thank you again. Catherine Harrison Rogers for staff. I just wanted to introduce our consultants assisting us in working on this project to rewrite our development codes. Friesa Nichols. We have Erica Craycraft. We have Dawn Warwick, as well as Karen Perez here to answer any questions. And Erica will go ahead and give the presentation. And of course, I will be here to answer anything as well.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Again, my name is Erica Craycraft with Friesa Nichols, here to give you an update on the Development Code revision. As Catherine mentioned, I'm joined today by Dawn Warwick and Karen Perez, also with Friesa Nichols. And two other team members that you may see at other times are Fred Lopez from Quantum Engineering and Dana Kyle, who is a local attorney helping us out with this project. Today, I would like to share with you a reminder of our process and give you an update on our current status, and also look forward at our next steps and the community engagement plans that we have for later in the process. And then lastly, I would be happy to take any questions or comments that anyone may have. First, starting with the process, this is just a reminder of our scope, the items of your current development code that we are looking at. On the left side, you can see these sections that we are doing what we're calling a major review. The main focus, we're really looking at zoning, subdivisions, the design standards, which is things like parking and landscaping, drainage, and also signs. And on the right side, you can see some of the sections that we're expecting a more minor review. Our process is about a 2-year process structured in 3 different phases. In phase 1, that's what we call the diagnostic evaluation. We began that last spring. And during that time, we reviewed your plans that you had in place, like the Elevate Comprehensive Plan, Active Transportation Plan, Parks Plan, and others. Also reviewing your current code, so we made sure we had an understanding of where you are today. We had a virtual open house where we invited any additional public input to be shared. And we also conducted what we called code user interviews, where we wanted to hear from the folks who most frequently use the code. So city staff, also the city councilors and Planning and Zoning Commission who were seated at that time. So we spent about the first 6 months through this process working on documenting where we are today, what are some of the issues, and how do we plan to address them moving forward. Today we are in phase 2, which is the process where we are actually drafting the content, and we're doing that by different sections, working very closely with city staff, and we are currently about 2/3 of the way through this phase. Looking ahead to phase 3, we've reserved several months toward the end of the process once we have a completed, more polished draft that's ready for public input. So at that time during phase 3, we want to work on really refining that document and making sure that that is ready to move forward with the adoption formal process. So I mentioned that we're currently in phase 2 and we are drafting the code. You see on the right side the 4 main chapters that we're really looking at: general provisions, subdivisions, design standards, and the zoning. And as we prepare each one of these sections, we, the consultant team, draft that section and we provide it to your city staff, and they do a great job at reviewing each of those sections and sending their comments back to us. Then what we do, we revise our sections based on what we've heard from city staff, and we continue to repeat that process usually a couple of times before we get most of city staff's comments addressed and we get a draft that's ready to move forward. And so you can see on the right side, the highlighted sections are the design standards and the zoning. That's what we are really focusing our effort on right now, because the first 2, general provisions and subdivisions, are actually, our initial drafts are available on the website right now. If you look at realizelascruces.com on the documents page, you'll see a initial draft version of each one of those chapters along with a video. Each one is about 5 minutes long that gives an overview about what the chapter is and what are some things to take note of if anyone wants to review those. So those are currently available. As we're working on drafting these sections, we're frequently referencing back to the Elevate Las Cruces Comprehensive Plan. Whenever the city developed that plan, you all did a very robust public engagement effort and a lot of visioning that informed the plan. And the plan includes about 500 different recommendations. And those recommendations range across whether they may be related to the development code. They could be capital improvements. Some of them are follow-up plans or studies that might be needed, or others can just be general policies for the city. So we're looking, of course, mainly at the ones from the development code. And there are about 200 of those items related to the development code. So what you see here is our working list, where we took those 200 items and we put them in a checklist, and we're making sure that we're updating each one of those items or addressing each one of those items in the code update. So we are keeping track of that in terms of the policy framework from Elevate. In terms of the physical framework from Elevate, we are also looking quite a bit at the place types and overlay place types, especially as we are working on the code update. And you'll be able to see those in the zoning chapter, especially related to the zoning districts, and then also in our roadway design, also the landscaping, all references back to the Elevate recommendation. So you'll be able to see how those have been pulled forward. In addition to implementing the plan, we're also looking at ways to streamline both processes and also the document. So it's easier to develop here in Las Cruces in general, and also it's easier to review the code document. It is a very technical document, and so we want to do the best that we can to make it easy to understand. Looking ahead at our next steps and our plans for community engagement, you're probably aware that meetings have started with the Technical Advisory Committee. That's the committee that was appointed by the mayor and city council. There are 15 members on this committee, and there are representatives from the development community, local community organizations, local professors, and so it's a nice mix of people who have a technical background and also some who may not, but they're also very useful in the sense that they can help us with making sure that the code is clear and it is readable as we're working through those sections. The Technical Advisory Committee is a city staff-led initiative. Assistant City Manager Eric Enriquez is the leader for that committee, so that's something that your city staff is handling. And once they have reviewed those that process and they have comments from the Technical Advisory Committee, that is passed on to us at the consultant team. City staff is reviewing draft sections for preliminary feedback with the Technical Advisory Committee. All of the sections and the content that they're reviewing is the same as what's available on the website. So everything is publicly available if anyone is interested in looking at it, but we aren't really requesting community-wide input at this time on those drafts. They are generally just available for transparency, and if anyone is interested, they are available on the website. Looking ahead at our next steps, we will continue to be working with city staff as we move forward through the rest of Phase 2 to finish developing and refining the draft code, and also receiving that preliminary feedback from the Technical Advisory Committee. Once we have gone through that process and we have a more complete, polished draft, we'll plan to bring that back to City Council and to the Planning and Zoning Commission for any initial comment that you all may have, and that's really making sure that we're ready to move forward with the public process. Are there any issues or changes that you all would like to see before we share a community draft where we're actually requesting that input? So once we have gotten the green light from the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, we'll move forward with hosting an open house event where we will be officially requesting community feedback on the draft. That open house event, we envision that happening probably in spring 2023, toward the earlier part of the year. At that event, we expect that that will be an in-person event, and it will likely be occurring over 2 evenings. It will be the same event both nights, just being more flexible with folks' schedule. At the open house, we like to start any of our public meetings with an educational component, so everyone can have an understanding of what the code is for, what is in it, and generally just trying to make sure that everyone feels that they have the background knowledge they need to be able to provide meaningful input on the code draft. We'll also highlight some of the key items from the draft that most people may be interested in seeing. A lot of times this is like a top 10 or top 20 things that people are most likely to care about for what's in the code draft. At the open house event, we will have feedback opportunities both those evenings, but then also for an ongoing period of time after that. If someone comes to the open house and it's the first that they're hearing about a development code and they're really just learning what's going on, we want to make sure that we're allowing them some time afterwards to go back and review the draft if they would like to and get their thoughts together and get that to us. So that will be an ongoing feedback opportunity. And similarly, both at the open house and then an ongoing period, we would like to be able to conduct one-on-one discussions. And these are envisioned as a one-on-one sit-down with someone who may be a property owner, a business owner, someone who's interested or concerned about how the new code may affect them personally, so we can have that chance to sit down with them, look up their address, and talk through how the code applies now and how it will apply in the future to their specific situation. So that's something that we want to be flexible on and continue those discussions for a while, not just those 2 evenings. In addition to the in-person events, we would also like to offer a virtual alternative. We envision that similarly not just being a short time, but that would extend for a period of at least 2 weeks. And for reference, this is from back in the Phase 1 process when I mentioned that we were collecting community input. This is the virtual open house that we launched back in last spring. It is actually still available. If anyone would like to leave any open-ended public comments, it is available still at realizelascruces.com. At a similar timeline, whenever we are collecting that community input, we want to revisit with all of the code users who we interviewed again back in Phase 1, where we heard from them what would they like to see in the code update, with the point of that being to really just close the feedback loop. Did we adequately address your concerns that you expressed previously? Do you have any other concerns or feedback that they would like to provide? Just as a reminder, this is the list of the folks that we spoke with back during Phase 1. So during Phase 3, whenever we have that polished draft, we want to circle back with all of them and invite everyone to come back for any additional comment. Then once we have completed that round of public input, both from the community as a whole and also more specifically the code users, we will bring that feedback back to City Council and back to the Planning and Zoning Commission and share that feedback with you along with our proposed revisions that we think may be needed to address that feedback. So we'll bring that back to you for your review and direction at that time. And then lastly, once we have gone through that process, we will eventually be moving forward into the formal public hearings that would be needed to consider adoption of the code. And again, we are looking at that to be likely in spring 2023. With that, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions or comments that anyone may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Erica. Doesn't look like any. I see George out in the audience. I don't know if there's any members of the public who would like to comment on this. No? George, no? No? Okay. All right, well, I guess everything is going pretty good then.
All right.
No comments from council or public. Well, thank you again for your presentation and the work that you're doing. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, last item is going to be the automated speed enforcement. I think now I know why Councilor Sorg is here. So the Lieutenant Sean Mullen will be discussing. Well, this came up during his administration, and he's probably here to see where we're at on that, because he probably still has constituents or residents that are Councilor Sorg, this is the speed cameras. You don't want to stay for this? Remember when the ones we talked about a long time ago?
No, he doesn't.
I don't know where this goes. There it is. There you go. I don't know how to lift the desk, so hopefully everyone can hear me clearly. Let's see. All right, good afternoon, Mayor, Council. My name is Sean Mullen. I am the lieutenant for the traffic section at the Las Cruces Police Department. And today I've been asked to come and speak with you about automated speed enforcement. Now, this is just going to be an overview of what automated speed enforcement is, how it works, what its purpose is, and how we could implement it here in the city if decided. So automated speed enforcement units are essentially radar devices that are connected to cameras and monitor a specific section of a roadway for speed or speed violators. This equipment can be fixed position or mobile. And what I mean by that is if it's fixed, it's mounted to a pole or something that's stationary. Mobile units are not necessarily driving up and down the roadway with you, but they can be positioned at different areas throughout the city based on need or trends that we see. So what is its purpose? Increase traffic enforcement resources to positively affect driving behavior. This is reduce speeders who endanger our pedestrians, cyclists, and other motorists on the roadway. They're designed, to identify violators and lessen the need for police presence on the roadside. So how does it work? So specifically, this equipment is in position and it monitors vehicle speeds on the roadway and takes a picture of a vehicle that is exceeding a threshold limit of speed as it approaches. It documents the video, documents in a video of that speed violation, as well as takes a photograph of the vehicle, the license plate, and the speed at which it's traveling. A secondary picture is captured after the vehicle passes the unit to document the license plate. The system captures high-resolution photographs and video. Before a notice of violation is ever sent to anyone, it's reviewed by a commissioned officer to determine if the violation is valid. If the violation is valid, the citation is issued. Some statistics, how effective are they? According to the cdc.gov website, a 2010 study saw average speed reductions of between 1% and 15%, a reduction in injury crashes between 8% and 49%, and fatal or serious injury crashes between 11% and 44%. A second one from the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration. For fixed units, up to 54% for all crashes and 47% for fatal and injury crashes. Mobile units saw a reduction up to 20% on major principal arteries. Pros and cons list. One pro is public safety. They're out there 24/7. We have 3 shifts at the police department. They'd be out there continuously all day and all night monitoring for speed violators to ensure that our roadways are as safe as can be. This allows for law enforcement to attend to other calls for service. Video and photo evidence of the violation is great. In speaking with legal about this previously, they ran a program and saw a lot of success when someone would come in for a violation and see a video of themselves or their vehicle speeding through an intersection. It's kind of hard to argue with the video and the photos of it. Unmanned. Unmanned means that we won't have personnel out there actively writing these citations, and there's less chance for offender and officer contact. Some concerns that have been brought up, I shouldn't say brought up, or that I've read about, the big brother concern, that is the cameras are always watching. Cameras are a part of our everyday life. They're here in this room, they're in grocery stores, gas stations, everywhere you go. It's just one thing that would be on the public roadways to make sure that drivers are doing everything they can to be safe for the other commuters on the road, pedestrians, cyclists, and everyone else. A profit-raising mechanism. There are 2 tiers or 2 types of speed van programs that I've read about. One is a tier-based, where there is a fee paid to a vendor based on the number of citations issued. The other is a flat fee, whereas a municipality signs a contract with a vendor for a flat fee every month for those cameras. Equipment issues and vandalism. This is self-explanatory. If the equipment were to fail or be vandalized, Rio Rancho has seen some of this, as well as there's a recent article in Albuquerque where one of their speed cameras was stolen. So it does happen. Delayed enforcement, and that is when an officer pulls you over, it's immediate. You know you were speeding, or the officer has you captured on radar or LiDAR to capture your speed, whereas this delayed enforcement, after it's reviewed by an officer, it would be sent out in the mail, and you'd receive your violation weeks after the event. Some local statistics. And these are from our agency. The data was taken up to 7/31, so it'd be from January 1st through July 31st, 2022. The reason I stopped it there for 2022 is because that was the last completed month. Averages. So the national average, 29% of all fatal crashes were speed related. New Mexico, according to NHTSA data, this number is actually closer to 40% for all fatal crashes. And here in the city of Las Cruces, we are at 20%. What would this program require? It would require a current update to the current STOP, Safe Traffic Operations Program ordinance, appointment of hearing officers, staff for this program dependent on the work that we contract out to a vendor or a company that provides this services, selection of the locations, an officer dedicated for this program, notary, court monitor, attorney, legal assistant, and then also the physical office space where the hearings would need to be conducted and all essential equipment to conduct those hearings. Any questions? I assume there is.
Thank you. I'll just go down the row here. Councillor Graham, Bencomo, and Flores.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, I didn't realize you were going backwards. Thank you so much. This could just be my failing memory, but we had these at some point, right?
Mayor, Councilor Graham, yes, several years ago, back 2010 era, we had red light cameras, and that was a red light and its speed enforcement incorporated into one. Okay,
I'm horrified that it was 2010 because I was like, oh, it was like 2 years ago, but that's how my timeline spins as I age. I specifically remember one, maybe intersection of Loman and Walnut, I think?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Why, so what was the story last time around and why did we move away from them?
In speaking with those who were there before my time, at least taking over this program, my understanding is that the program was done away at the request of council and from the community.
If I may add to that.
Please.
So it was red flex, and it was actually working out quite well. Unfortunately, there were some cities that they had found that Some of the higher ups in the company were doing some things with some of the elected officials that they weren't supposed to, and the council just wanted to they didn't think that the company was going to be around, so we just got rid of them. But let me just tell you something, they worked out really good because it really changed the behavior of people just running red lights. I mean, they're not running yellow lights. I mean, they're running red. I mean, 2 or 3 after red now to the point, so. And I know Councilor Flores probably was a recipient of 1 or 2 of them. That's why she's shaking her head. But I have to tell you something. When I was a councilor for that district, they really appreciated it very much because they were getting everyone. It really was slowing down and changing behavior. And we hated to get rid of them because they worked.
Okay, thank you, except for being made to feel even older than I typically feel. As I was like, oh God, that was forever ago. No, so I'm just interested to hear the rest of the conversation, particularly that intersection popped to my mind. That's currently in my district, and I know it's an intersection of concern for Lynn Middle School, particularly before and after school when some students need to cross that. I mean, it's a long intersection also. So I'm curious to hear all the discussion. Thank you.
And if I may add, the money did not go to the general fund. It went to public works to help with the roads, and we didn't keep it. A lot of cities use it for generating revenue, but it went to public works for streets and improvements. And I don't, because we didn't do it to raise money. We did it to slow down traffic and avoid accidents. And I still remember there was a situation. I very rarely go on ride-alongs. I know you all like to do that. It's just that I don't know. They don't let me see the action. I'm 2 or 3 cars behind, right? But anyways, there was something that it was a really bad incident, and everyone was there: state police, county, city. And I remember the red light cameras, and they were working fine. And I was thinking, these cameras are working to keep our city safe from speeders, while these others, and they finally caught the bad guy there near the Holiday Inn, well, the old Holiday Inn, I don't know what they call it now, Ramada, but it was a while back. So I'm a big supporter of it. And and did it a year before the election, and that was the highest ever, not that I'm saying that it was good for votes, but that was the highest percentage I ever received.
Thank you for that thorough answer.
So, Councilor Bencomo.
Thanks, Mayor. It might come as no surprise, but I disagree with you. Not on the votes. I've only done this once. I have a lot of concerns about these cameras. And Lieutenant, I am curious to hear from you. I know you're here to present the facts. I think Council asked for this presentation, and I'm curious, though, if the department has a leaning towards one way or another, whether you all support something like this or would prefer it above your pay grade, perhaps. But I am curious to hear from the department which way you are leaning towards these cameras, and then I have a couple questions.
Mr. Mayor, Council Bencomo, Deputy Chief Paul Brock, Deputy Chief of Operations for the record. I would have to say that the department is remaining neutral, and this is this is kind of a proposal to put forth to council or to bring the idea up. It's been brought up, and the mayor had requested some information that we provide to you in regards to this, and that's the purpose of this today.
What a great answer. Thank you, DCE. Okay, so here, maybe this will help, I think, frame my concerns. And I'm not necessarily totally against it. I think there's been plenty of constituents that have reached out to me about speeding in any particular, down Hoagland particularly, or wherever, right, McClure. So I'm not necessarily against it, especially if funds go towards public works for traffic calming measures. I think for me, some of the biggest concerns are around where you place the cameras, and that low-income communities often are disproportionately impacted by these kinds of fees and fines, and they're the folks that then have the harder time paying for their tickets that then lead to driver's license suspension. Like, it causes a ripple effect for low-income individuals, low-income families that I particularly have a concern with. I imagine this is also not cheap alternative to traffic calming. I imagine this will be a pretty expensive endeavor. Do you have an analysis of cost?
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo. So to answer your first part of your question, as far as communities that would be disproportionately targeted by the system. So the system is intended to look for violators, speed violators, not a specific vehicle type, specific driver, anything, just solely off of speed. So a threshold limit is instituted based off of a posted speed limit in a given area. Hoagland is a great example. It could change the speed at 2 points of the road, and a lot of times, because there's such new, I shouldn't say new, because there's always freshmen coming into that school every single year, it takes a while for people to understand the speed limit on that street. And so we actively try and patrol it from a traffic standpoint to make a positive impact on drivers who are speeding up and down that roadway. However, this system specifically would just target people who are driving over the speed limit, regardless. As far as cost, as stated before, it's a tier-based system is one option, also a flat fee system. So tier-based, to kind of sum it up, if there were 200 tickets written in a month, it would be based on each individual unit. So if one van wrote 200 tickets, the first 100 tickets from systems that I've seen would be at a certain percentage to the vendor, certain percentage to the city, 60-40. Let's just throw that number out there. 100 to 150 would be at 35%. 150 to 200, 30%, and so on and so forth. A flat fee system or contract, much like, and the way you can compare this is Albuquerque's platform to Rio Rancho's. Rio Rancho runs a tier-based system right now, and Albuquerque's is flat fee-based. And from reading Albuquerque's contract, my understanding of it is they pay $7,900 per camera per month. That's the base fee. There's an additional charge per options, I guess you can include onto the camera system, and it would just increase from there. But their bottom number is, from what I read in their contract, is $7,900 per camera per month.
Okay, thank you for that. I am glad Public Works is here as well, because I think this conversation goes hand in hand with traffic calming measures. I'd be curious to hear from you all about the kinds of resources that Public Works has in order to implement traffic calming infrastructure and measures. I know that the process is, I don't want to say lengthy, it's diligent, right? When you go to a community, you take surveys from the people who live on that street and all of that. And I'm just curious if you feel like right now you have, what kind of capacity you have, resources in order to address traffic calming infrastructure.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, I can take the first half of that question from a police department standpoint. When we look at speed in a given area as a problem, I've received many of your emails forwarded to me from the chief, and what we do is we put that onto a list of traffic studies that we perform in an area. So we have radar equipment that monitors in a different measure than Public Works. They're looking for different things than we are, but when the complaint is specifically for speed and for violation of speed, we try and monitor that up front and see what we can do with a law enforcement perspective before we turn it over to infrastructure. And I know you guys are all familiar with, but one great example of that, how we work together and we're able to accomplish this goal, is Alameda Street. Where speed was a concern. We had our traffic unit out there monitoring it, trying to enforce as peak hours permitted, and we saw the peak speeders on that roadway. It wasn't enough. Public Works was able to come and do the road diet on the street, and it really brought the speeding down into a compliant threshold.
That's been a great project, by the way. Lots of good feedback about that.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, David Cedillo, Public Works Director. Great question. Your question is on the resources for Public Works. As you just heard, we do follow a step process. Typically, we call them the 3 E's, right? We call them education first, to educate the public on those types of issues. Number two that we go to is then enforcement of that education. And then lastly, the solution is engineering. And that was a perfect example of that working. Now, the resources that Public Works has for that, budgeted, we have about $60,000 a year to address any traffic calming issues that are reported from the public that go through the process in our municipal code. However, as we look to do our reconstruction projects, we look at those traffic calming measures as we go through and we improve or we do full reconstructions of roadways. We take a look at all of that information and implement that.
Thank you, David. Yes, I'm very familiar with the 3 E's. Is the first thing you all drilled into our heads when we came on board. You said 60,000 per year for traffic calming?
That is correct, Councilor.
Do you usually go through that?
Typically, we do.
Okay.
We do, based on the requests.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, David. Those are all my questions. I do feel like there are a number of alternatives to this system that I think we need to get smarter about, like traffic calming infrastructure, working with communities to address that. Public Works is working with me right now on Melendres. Folks on Melendres have had significant issues with that. I've been talking to EFO. There's this new trend across the country around unarmed civilian servants executing traffic stops as opposed to police officers. And so I think this is an important conversation. Like I said, I'm not necessarily against it because I do understand that a lot of our community has been dealing with a lot of traffic control issues. I mean, it seems like I recently read something about pedestrian safety in New Mexico being some of the worst in the country. And so I know that we have significant issues. I just also think that there are alternatives that we can be looking at or perhaps implementing at the same time as these cameras that can be, I don't know, in hot zones, if you want to call them that. I just do have concerns about the disproportionate effects on certain neighborhoods.
Yeah. Before I get to Jennifer, Councilor, let me just share with you how the city did it before. They took the top 5 intersections that had the most crashes, and that's where they assigned them. One was Loman and Telshore, one was Loman and Walton. I think there was Solano and Maine, and I can't remember, I think there was one on Valley. But what I was thinking, a couple things. One, this was a civil matter. It's not a criminal, so it doesn't go on your driver's license. It doesn't affect your insurance rates or anything like that. Two, it was what I was thinking, if we were to do this as a test, would be Loman and Telshore and Sonoma Ranch Boulevard and Loman. So they both be outside of your district, in District 6. And so
I want traffic lights in my district. That's what I want. Hoagland, North Alameda.
Yeah,
but Mayor, I think, I'm sorry, just one thing, because I think David noted that the system that Public Works follows is, he just said the 3 E's and I'm forgetting them: education, enforcement, and then engineering. So if there are significant fatalities and crashes at intersections, then it might not be an enforcement issue. It could be an engineering issue. And those are the kinds of things that we should be looking at investing in versus perhaps somewhat Band-Aids.
I seriously doubt that we have the video, but they actually had video crashes of those intersections, so you could see the many people who ran the red light and caused the accidents. But anyways, Jennifer, you had a comment?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just to follow up with your concern, this is not a criminal action, it's a civil nuisance abatement action. And so it would not go on anybody's criminal record. It's a civil nuisance abatement action that would begin at an administrative level and go on through the district court if on appeal. There are several things that we would have to ensure in order to survive a possible constitutional challenge, which is the placement in an arbitrary and capricious manner. And so my suggestion would always be to make sure that the technology is placed based on statistical data, crash analysis, and that's where you want to focus. So if you do that and you rely on that, then you can usually survive any kind of challenge to that.
Yeah, and thanks, Jennifer. That reminded me, it wasn't just red light, it was actually speeding, but it was the worst kept secret that you could go 9 miles or below and still not get the ticket because it wouldn't flash. It was only when you hit 10 or above that it would flash and it would get you. So Councilor Flores could be doing, 8 miles over and fly right through there. So she knew to go under 10. So we have Councilor Flores and then Abeta.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Lieutenant Mullen. You have a very Irish name, Sean Mullen. But thank you again for your presentation. I am against it, and yes, I did receive one ticket. I did. I ran, but I didn't, well, in my humble opinion.
We have the picture of you too, and you're.
No, this is what happened. I appealed it. I wanted to see the tape. Guess what happened? There was no tape. Where's the cop that yada, yada, blah, blah? Where's the calibration? How often do you do it? Who's the company? No, we don't know. It was retired judge, and it was on the second floor. It wasn't Muni Court, Counselor.
Darden, Judge Darden.
Counsel. Well, I think it was Judge Darden. Very, very nice man. But it was not district court. It was upstairs on the second floor, here, City Hall. And, but at any rate, and the reason, and I thought it was you, Mayor, maybe it was another former city councilor, who said that it was expensive and that there were some problems, at least with Red X, throughout the country. And I know that El Paso took theirs down as well. But my biggest concern is that the calibration. And then so I appealed it. And then I had a $5 fine because they said, no, we can't find, the judge said, didn't he sit on the federal bench, Judge Darden? Anyway, he said, yeah. And it was like, what, you can't, how are you gonna, where's the tape? I want, nothing. So, and I did get a picture of my rear license plate, but it didn't show it didn't show the speed. It didn't show anything. So I think there's a problem with it. I think it'd be more expensive. I think what we should do is hire more, the solution to my objection would be to have more police officers on motorcycles so that they can see when the lights are beginning to turn and they can weave in and out of traffic if need be to get the, and you'd have a police officer to say, yeah, I saw it myself, and yada, yada. And so if someone goes to court, the officer is there to confirm that he saw it or she saw it. So I think it'd be a big expense. I'm glad that you brought this to us, but I'm direly, yeah, and I think that Councilor Bencomo raised a good point, answered very wisely by our Attorney Vega. But really, are we going to take this to the Supreme Court somehow about prosecution, selective prosecution? I don't know. Some of the solutions sometimes aren't, really attainable to people who get tickets. So anyway, I'm against it, but thank you very much for your very, very interesting presentation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure. Councilor, the tickets were $100?
It was $125.
Well, I think they gave you a little bit extra. But anyways, and then second, Red Flex paid for the entire installation. They paid for everything, and it was just based, they would receive a percentage of whatever tickets that were actually given. So it didn't cost the city anything. Yeah, and so, well, as I mentioned to you, but anyways, I just thought I'd share that with you. I think if we were to move in that direction, at least entertain how it would be done and how it was going to be paid. I agree with you. I wouldn't go that far because we learned how to do this from the city of Albuquerque. Albuquerque paid to have it all done. They still owed a lot of money to them, and when we saw what they did, we changed it. We just said you pay for the installation, you take them out, and then we pay you based on the number of tickets, not a set amount, not a set fee. And so it didn't cost the city anything. It was able to help benefit certain departments, and it slowed down the traffic.
Your Honor, with all due respect, then that was an incentive for them to rig their cameras. We're going to pay
That's
you
wh-
based on the amount of tickets?
That's why we had 9 miles over, so.
9 miles over?
I mean, it was calibrated, so if you were up to 9 miles, so if you got a ticket, you had to have been going 10 or above.
So instead of 35, you'd be going 46? So what's the big deal? That's the same thing. I don't get it. Anyway, Mr. Mayor.
Nobody was aware of it, except a few select people, I guess. I don't know, but that was calibrated. Okay, Councilor Abeyta.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I try to go the speed limit, and I slow down on yellows instead of speed up, so my personal views are to have them to keep other people safe. But I was curious, and thank you, Mayor, for the education on why the last ones were taken out. I was curious about that. I thought it was about case law, which I went kind of trying to look about some of those items. So some of the things that Councilor Flores brought up were included in some disputes about who was driving, that side of things. So I was curious if that was something that we had to consider. But then I also noticed for New Mexico law, jurisdictions that use red light cameras must also install signs and yellow flashing beacons or rumble strips to warn drivers that the cameras are operating at the intersection. So I'm curious if we'd have to put in other, like something like that too, for a speeding one, like any sort of indicators that we're using it.
We actually did have rumble strips when you were coming in, especially on Loman. When you, I don't know, they're not there anymore, but I don't know if David was still in Public Works at the time. But when you could, if you would go over it, then you knew that there was a camera coming up.
Okay.
Mayor and Councilor Abeyta, there was also signs posted that said there was photo enforcement effect.
Okay. If we're going to have a cost analysis, will all those elements be included with how much it would take to operate this type of program?
So, Mayor, Councilor Abeyta, in speaking with Rio Rancho, their program is entirely violator funded. So we can do a cost breakdown if you guys decide that you want to proceed forward with this. That's something that I can try and look into. I am not a research specialist or financial analyst by any stretch of the imagination, but I will find someone who is, and we can make sure that we present you some accurate numbers.
Mr.
Thank you. And
Hold on a second, Councilor. And Councilor Abeyta still has the floor.
thank you. And I guess a question for our legal is just, are there considerations that we still need to take in if we were to install this type of equipment?
Mayor and Council, I'm not, there are several things we would have to obviously introduce an ordinance that supports it. We would have to invoke our home rule authority in abating this nuisance. You can write the ordinance in many different ways. In Rio Rancho, we dedicated the funds to public safety, education, enforcement, and prevention. So you can write it into the ordinance any way you would like and how you would like the funds dedicated if you so choose. But there are many different options for that. And like Lieutenant was saying, in Rio Rancho, the program was self-sufficient when I was there, and so it was also in Albuquerque, so it becomes self-sufficient at some point. But the important part is to make sure that the funds are dedicated usually to whatever purpose you would like.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Just a couple things. We're not looking to vote on this right away. I think it would at least be beneficial to see what exactly which companies would be willing to do this and how much it would cost, and if they would pay for it. I agree. I'm not here to. I guess I look back at the old system, and it didn't cost us anything, and it helped public safety, and also provided some funds. It wasn't a whole lot. I mean, because remember, they don't have to pay it. I mean, there are some who didn't pay it. They just flat out didn't pay it. We couldn't do anything to them. Well, you know, we didn't have any, it wasn't a criminal, it was civil. So, but the majority, I'd say maybe 75, 80% paid. And, you know, it slowed down the behavior of running red lights. And I think, and recently Albuquerque, I don't know, is that the same one that's using, are they using the same that Rio Rancho is? Because I know Albuquerque just went to this about 3 months ago, I think.
So, Mayor, Albuquerque uses a company called Novoa Global, and Rio Rancho uses red flex. To speak to your comment about cost, the National Roadway Safety Strategy just implemented earlier this year actually dedicated funding to photo enforcement programs, automated speed safety cameras. And Albuquerque and Rio Rancho both employ a model where if you cannot afford the citation, there's community service options in lieu of.
Councilor Coran, I guess has your light on.
Thank you. I really appreciate your presentation, Lieutenant Mullen, and I think I look forward to, I think I would just share that I went from being, I think my constituents really do wish there were less speeders in their neighborhood, and I understand that this will actually not change that at all. So for me, the idea of buying votes with a speed cam is pretty not going to work, I don't think. I think we probably need to come up with some more meaningful solutions for neighborhood traffic calming. And I think actually the police department, you all do a really great job of that, and I've seen it sort of in action and in a number of places in my area, and so I appreciate that. If we did continue this conversation, I would hope to see data not just related to the relative safety or the efficacy of these at sort of reducing crashes, but I would like to see that compared to some other strategies that might exist, which might include and you just said you're not a research person, so I don't think that, I'm not like charging you with this, but I think if we're going to evaluate it, I think it would need to be in the context of costs and benefits to both the individual community, like numbers of dollars, numbers of people's sort of inputs, and then also other potential outcomes that might have a broader impact that positively affects people's sort of behavior. I don't think that enforcement is the best way to change people's behavior. I think there are a multitude of other things that have been demonstrated that actually do better. That's why education is the first of the E's. And so I hope that if we do continue this conversation, I know that my constituents care about speeding. I don't see that this is necessarily going to be the kind of thing that would really help for that, but I hope that we can continue the conversation with enough information that we know all the options that might be available for addressing neighborhood speed related issues. So that would be my hope if we continued to have this conversation specifically about the cameras, or more broadly, I would argue we should, about speeding.
So Councilor, how do you want to continue the conversation? And when I said about it was during an election, that was actually one of the questions brought up by the, they have these civic groups and they say, do you support it or are you against it? And so, yeah, I support it. That's basically what I was referring to. But how would you want to continue the conversation?
I guess if we were looking at all of the options for how we're reducing speed, I would like to know sort of in the context of how all of the data that was sort of presented related to reducing speed, what are the other things that we can do to reduce speed? And I would want a conversation about these to be contextualized with other options for reducing speed or making the streets safer in whatever ways we possibly can, and the costs and benefits to those as well. So I would like to have more context for the conversation. But if someone asked me that in a forum, and I'm not running for re-election, I would say no, I don't support them.
Okay. So getting back to at least wanting to see what the cost would be and what a proposal would look like, or are you saying you don't want to have that conversation?
I'm saying I don't think that would be a good use of of Lieutenant Mullen's time. From my perspective, I feel like that would be not enough data, and unless he's going to become a research artist exclusively, I don't know if you really want to do that. But I don't know that it would necessarily. Well, I mean, I guess I defer to you all to see if we want to go forward or not. But I would say, I don't know that that's a good use of our effort.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem, you had a...
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Lieutenant Mullen. I appreciate your presentation. I'd like to move forward with the conversation. I'd like for you to specifically address those areas where we are seeing speeding, fatality fatalities, crashes, those things. I think that information is important to us. I also know that since I got elected, speed is a big deal in our neighborhoods, and there's a process, right? There's that neighborhood, the calming program. There's the signs that you give to folks that say respect our neighborhood, and then it moves up to enforcement. And when you enforce in all these areas specific, at least to my district, speed there is a reduction in speed, but it goes right up after you leave. And there's other things, and so that are implemented as well. And so I'd like some collaboration and coordination on the presentation from Public Works with all the number of things that we have implemented in our community, and some analysis whether that has reduced the speed overall. I think there is some of that data that's out there. I mean, when you look at, and Lieutenant Mullen, will you please go back to our statistics? I mean, those are, we should be very concerned about this. We should be very concerned about it. And I don't think it's one answer. I think it's a spectrum, right, of several things that should be happening alongside this. But I hear you. I think this is, everybody has very valid points. We don't want our communities that are underserved being over-policed, and this is probably something that people might think, but I think overall, the general feeling is people would like this to come back. And that has been sort of something that over the last couple of years, unfortunately, people email me and feel like this is a solution. Is it the be-all, end-all? No. But I'd like to see it come back with a number of data points and departments presenting on this, and maybe a national look at a comparison of cities that don't have it and cities that do, and has that actually reduced the speeding and the fatalities and such. So, thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Bencomo. Excuse me, Councilor Bencomo.
Thanks, Mayor. Now that this conversation is sort of being sifted through, I guess there's two different conversations to be had, and that's whether something like this will work at major intersections versus traffic calming within neighborhoods. And I don't imagine that we would buy a significant amount of cameras to put in neighborhoods. Is that correct? Are these better? Here we go. I'm getting some nods over here. And so then, to me, then the conversation is, okay, out of these 20% of fatal crashes were speed related, where were they, right? How are we then better addressing traffic calming measures within neighborhoods that, again, support perhaps a higher budget item for Public Works to address those? And maybe that's the next work session, is how, on traffic calming, how are we educating the public? How are we, working with neighborhoods that have come to us and said there are significant speeders down my small residential street, right? Like that I just think we're having two separate conversations, Mayor, and perhaps I'd like clarity from you in terms of when you thought about this being a solution to speeding, how did you imagine it, where? Because again, I think Councilor Coran is right. This isn't going to help people in District 6 unless we're talking about North Main and Elks or whatever, right? And so I'm curious about how you thought about this, and then if the next step from here is how do we talk about and better implement strategies to address traffic control within neighborhoods.
Well, thank you, Councilor. So let me just share this with you, and it's interesting that Councilor Sorg left. So prior to him leaving office and Councilor Coran taking over, he would get the most emails on UTV riders who were going into off of Elks and just driving on to the dirt at all hours of the night. And so originally, when I spoke with EFO, what I had sent him originally were mobile cameras. So how it morphed into more stationary or interesting, but that's okay. I'm good with these as well. But that was the part, so that they could be used to, because they were going supposedly at all hours of the day, 12 o'clock, midnight, 1, 2 o'clock. So if that's still happening, I mean, let's put it this way, Councilor Coran's had the most, I'm not picking on that district, but, they copy me, and she probably has the most number of residents who are complaining about speeders. I have one, I can't find his name, he sends me an email every other day of how many people he catches speeding, and I think he copies the chief on that, and, but I'll be real candid with you, it's getting to the point where, I think members of the public, of the community, need to know how their representatives feel about these issues. I mean, because you guys, some of you are just turning a blind eye. You talk about wanting to have safe streets and make sure people are not run over, yet here is an opportunity to at least entertain what is it going to cost, how do they think they can address it. And if you want to shut it down, okay, I understand that. And this is a democracy. It's based on what the majority wants. But I have to, I haven't responded to them because I said, hey, this is coming before council, and there you go. So I don't know where they live. I haven't asked them. But I have a feeling that they aren't necessarily in Councilor Flores' district. For some reason, I get this feeling because I think they're in District 5 because they're seeing so many people on Elks. You've got Sonoma Ranch Boulevard North there's just a lot of people that are they're speeding down there. That's a possibility. But no, I don't see it in neighborhood streets by no means. But this is a way of funding some of these other traffic controlling measures in some of the smaller streets, and because money's limited, and so this is just, I guess what I'm trying to say is an opportunity to at least see what's out there, see exactly what is being proposed. I explained to you why we did away with red flags. The majority of the council just got spooked, and they just said, this is crazy, we don't like this, and they just got a little scared, and they just said, get rid of them, and that's why that happened.
Mayor, I do think it's to characterize this conversation as us not caring about traffic control. I think what I've heard from my colleagues is very much the opposite of that, so I just think it's important that you refrain from saying that, because I don't think that's what's happening here.
Okay, well, I guess that comment probably should go to Councilor Coran primarily, okay? So, I mean, she doesn't even want to entertain it. I think this is something here that, I mean, I'm saying the majority comes from District 5. And if she's not reading those emails and she's not understanding that people want some type of traffic control, okay. But hey, I can only handle the emails that I get, and I'm just telling them, I'm at least giving them, the residents, some sense of hope that council will at least entertain this, instead of just shutting it down before it even comes
Literally
forward.
no one is shutting it down, Mayor. That's not what's happening here.
That's what I've heard from at least 3 council members.
No, I said, if I may, Your Honor.
Well, if council, yes. Go ahead.
What I said is that I'm against having those red lights. I am not against education, and Councilor Coran can speak for herself, but I heard quite differently, maybe because I'm sitting right next to her and I could hear what she said. She's not saying what you just attributed to her. She does care. She did say that it would be education, those 3 E's, whatever they are, but definitely education. And I think all of us up here are trying to find ways to make our streets safer. And I get the emails, and so do you, on all the noisy, the racing out in the East Mesa. A lot of it, I think, is taking place on county land. But yeah, I don't think it's fair to characterize it as, it's not a black and white issue. I just don't think it's practical. I agree with Councilor Coran 100%. I don't think that this is a good way for the police department to be here today. I think it's an issue that should be discussed insofar as education, maybe working with our public schools, seeing what they're doing in terms of teaching the children how to be safe when they're crossing Loman, when they're leaving Lynn Elementary and trying to go north on Walnut across Loman. I mean, there's just safety issues. I think everybody's concerned about safety. But my personal opinion And it's not just based on that silly ticket, my only speeding ticket I've ever received in my life. That's just humor. I don't think that should be the determining factor, my subjective experience, but I think everybody wants education. We also want the traffic to move along Loman Avenue. I mean, it would just be wonderful if people knew that when the light turns green, you go. So, it's that kind of stuff. I mean, I think we're going to be living with that kind of situation, but we do need safer streets. I don't think this is the answer, because I don't think we're going to get a study out on McClure or Hoagland or some of the neighborhood streets where this is occurring. It's going to be education. Thank you, Your Honor.
You know what, Councilor, that's exactly where it was. Valley and Hoagland, I believe, was the other camera. But let me just share something with you, and I've kept it reserved. You talk also about safety. Let me tell, I'll be real candid with you also. I'm also concerned about officer safety. I don't think that, it's a different time right now. I see, maybe not necessarily here, thank God, but I see, I travel a fair amount of places, and I see where officers merely pulling people over, and they're just being attacked or shot at. And what I'm trying to say is this is very difficult here. We've got a very tough balancing act here. We've got to help run the city. We've got to do our best to protect our employees, our police department, all of our employees. But yet we have to make our streets as safe as possible for the drivers and those that choose to break the law. I was in LA just a few weeks ago. A young officer who just 1 week out of the academy was at the gym and gets shot, killed. This is not right. These are things that if we can help keep the speeders and the red light runners down using technology instead of, I have emails from saying, well, just hire more police officers. Or someone just said, put more police officers out. No, that's just like saying throw away your cell phones, throw away your computers, and just go back to putting things on hand. Let's use technology at our advantage. It's not a criminal citations, it's civil, and it's something there to help make our streets safer. I know that maybe you haven't been that involved in city government throughout the years, but I can tell you that, well, most of you, and if the shoe fits, I'm just saying you all weren't here when it was bad, and it's getting that bad. They need to learn how. They need to stop when the light turns red, and they're not. And so this is something here. Unfortunately, we might have. If it doesn't look like, but I would like for it to at least have that discussion, and to see exactly what it's going to take and how much it's going to cost. That's it. Instead of not even moving forward into that. Now, again, I was talking about the mobile cameras, and when Jennifer said we have to use a certain criteria, okay, well, that makes sense. And I don't know if that criteria about 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning with UTVs riding out there, but I'm going to have to respond to these constituents one way or the other, okay? And I'll just be real candid with you. I'll tell you right up front now. If we have to, I'm going to have them reference this video, because I can only put them off so long, and that's all I'm saying. Because I feel that we're doing our best to make our city as safe as possible, and I think we owe it at least to see what it takes and what this is going to cost. That's my opinion. Okay. Was there, Councilor Beta?
Yes, thank you. I have found Councilor Cran to be very responsive and caring for her community in all aspects. And the comments that she put here today were that of just making sure that we were using facts and data to make smart and wise decisions for this community, which I don't think is unnecessary. If we are going to spend money for a program, then we need to make sure that it is effective. Otherwise, it's a waste of time and resources. And there are other ways that we can address the issues, perhaps, that can still preserve officers' time, like speeding tables, education, those types of things. So I don't think the two conversations, it's not one or the other here, but it was an ask that if we are going to move forward, that we need to have probably the facts and a lot of data for both options so that we can look at them and judge and view. And that doesn't make one uncaring, that doesn't make one better than the other. It just means that we need more information. And so I do find the comments here today, I don't think were necessary for my fellow counselors. I don't.
I understand, but I still stand by the comments that I made. And so it's just a matter of, do you want to move forward, at least entertain this information, or not? I mean, that's just really when it gets right down to it.
I'm happy to have both options available to make a reasonable choice.
Okay, and I agree. I mean, that's something there that I think we need to have. We need to show what intersections are causing the most crashes, and also how would this be implemented and how much it would cost. That's it. That's all I'm asking for. But it sounded...
So that didn't need that did not require the comments that you gave to the fellow counselor then to have both of them.
Yeah. Councilor Abita, I understand where you're coming from, but I have to tell you, as I mentioned to you before, I'm sure you field a lot of questions or concerns. I field 6 times as many, okay? And I'm just telling you, have put off a lot of these residents saying, hey, you know what, this is going to come to council in a work session, and I'll let you know then.
And I hope you can reference that then we and Councilor Curran was concerned, but wanted facts and data to make a best possible choice, because that is what is going to be shown on the video.
I'm just going to reference this video, today's meeting. That's it. Councilor Bencomo.
Thank you. Yes, I hope you do. Thank you, Councilor Abeta, for your comments. I completely agree with you. It's been incredibly disrespectful, Mayor. Additionally, though, I would like to also have a conversation around our calming traffic programs, if they need more funding, how we're reaching out to constituents to address calming traffic measures within neighborhoods outside of the big intersections.
Mayor.
Let me ask David one question. David, regarding traffic calming, I know there was a time where the city didn't like speed humps, and I have seen them on occasion, but what is, and the main reason is because of, public safety, especially if an ambulance is having to go down a particular road and there's a bunch of speed humps, and, what's been the policy on that lately?
Mayor, David Cedillo, Public Works Director, for the record. So we've moved away from speed humps on roadways, more specifically residential roadways. Our code does not allow traffic calming measures that we use on local streets for collectors and arterials. So based on the municipal code, we only address those within the residential areas. So we have moved away from speed humps, which before were just about a 3-4 foot section of asphalt piled on in a hump. We have thus moved forward with speed tables and speed cushions. So speed tables are a lot longer, have a lot more of a gradual slope. As you come up to them, they top out at a certain height and they go back down. Our speed cushions do allow a gap in between that to allow for emergency vehicles to get through there as they're responding and not have to go over those. So those are the types of improvements that we've done as far as going from speed humps to speed tables and those speed cushions. Thank you.
Good, thanks. Councilor Flores, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I did, but I already forgot now. I think that we should, I think that we should have maybe a work session on safety, but I don't think I don't think there's a lot of consensus to, well, anyway, I'm opposed to this being a solution. We really don't know what the problem is when we have to look at different solutions, but I don't think this is the answer, and there had to have been a good reason why the city got rid of it before. And when there's a traffic violation now, does some of the money that gets collected go to our city, or where does that money go? Do you know, Mayor?
That I have no idea.
Okay. Does
I
anybody?
see Judge Goldbaum in the audience. We may want to ask her.
No,
I have
it's
idea.
okay. I'd rather not. But thank you.
Jennifer.
Oh, Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Several years ago, there was a change to the law that required that if you had traffic enforcement for red light cameras, that revenue would have to go to the state. So it would be deposited into the state's general fund, and the city would only get a portion of that. So a lot of cities started eliminating the red light cameras because of that. There is a provision in the state law that allows for the nuisance abatement. So those are mobile vans, and they cannot be placed on state highways or state roads. They have to be on local roads and local highways. So there's that was one of the reasons why a lot of cities got away from the red light cameras.
Yeah.
Was that your question, or was your question for city citations?
Well, I'm just wondering.
Was it for the red light camera money or city citation money?
Well, if there was a city citation, it would go to the city, I imagine, wouldn't it?
Mayor and Council, like I said before, this isn't a criminal action, so it's a civil nuisance abatement, and it would go to wherever the funds were dedicated.
Yeah. It would be the city's money to determine where it would go.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And so it just seems to me that I don't think that this is going to take care of all of the traffic problems that we have in the city. And I think the money that we would spend on this isn't going to justify the fact that it isn't serving every corner of our city. Because we have problematic areas where we're just not going to be having those red lights. We're just not. We're going to have them on Loman, we're going to have them on Valley, and that's it. So frankly, yeah, I don't want to be rude or anything, but thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so what am I hearing here? Do we ask that they bring back information with costs and certain areas that they have crashes, and if we were to move in that direction, this is where they would be placed, and this is how much it's going to cost?
The entire city?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. To see what, just like we did before, they took the 5 top most dangerous intersections.
How much is that going to cost?
Well, I think they can do it internally. I think that's how they did it before. How they did it before is they took the top 5 intersections that had the most crashes. All right, and then that's when they came back, and that's how they brought the information to council, and Red Flag said, okay, we can install these cameras all at their cost. It didn't cost the city anything. And okay, that's what I was at least wanting to at least see.
If we're just going to be intersections, we already know.
Well, you're not on, you're going to have to speak into the microphone so they can pick it up. So I'm looking to see what the rest of you are saying. Yes, okay, all right. Looks like the majority said yes, so thank you. I appreciate that very much. Oh, George, you have a comment? We'll give you 3 minutes, okay? Thank you, Lieutenant Mullins.
George Pearson. As volunteering with Safe Routes to School, I hope you can look at the mobile option so that you can set these up and do enforcement in school zones, because that is a big problem throughout the city. As I remember with the red light cameras, that was the state mandated a $100 maximum, and $50 of that went straight to the state. I don't know if this is also affected by that. And as far as the funding from the STOP program, I don't remember any street improvements. No new bicycle lanes were built because of the STOP funds, but you did purchase police cars, and that's the only, my memory of where the STOP money went was to purchase police cars. Part of the discussion that was lightly covered is equity, and that's something that Councilor Bencomo addressed and the Sergeant briefly mentioned. So as you build the ordinance, you should have a consideration, maybe income level-based fines with a community service component built into it. And as far as the 3 E's, education, enforcement, engineering, well, it should be education, enforcement, re-engineering. Engineering's already failed. Thank you.
Thanks, George. I don't recall a bicyclist getting a red light or speeding ticket, but you never know. But thank you for that information. Okay, all right, so looks like we're at least move forward with that information so that we can identify the top 5 areas or whatever areas you feel that are needed, and find out exactly how much it would cost and how it would work. So, okay, good. Okay, I think that's it. So if there's nothing further, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Councilor Graham, second by Councilor Bencomo, that we adjourn. Christine?
This is on the motion to adjourn the work session. Councilor Abeyta?
Yes.
Councilor Graham?
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo?
Yes.
Councilor Cran?
Yes.
Councilor Flores?
Yes.
Councilor Gondeta?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes. Okay, it's 4:07 p.m. We are adjourned. Thank you very much for all those of you in attendance. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Stand by for the agenda setting.
We don't have agenda setting today, Adrian. It's next Monday.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.